My wife slept with her boss, so I quietly stole his beautiful wife instead. She's so amazing, I told him at the company's party while he stood there shaking with rage. The restaurant was one of those places where the lighting costs more than the food. Soft amber glows pooling on white tablecloths, candles flickering, and glass hurricanes that probably had their own insurance policies. My wife Elena had chosen it. She always chose places like this when she had something to hide. I remember thinking that as I watched her across the table, her fingers dancing around the stem of her wine glass, never quite lifting it to her lips. She was nervous. Beautiful. Yes, Elena had always been beautiful in that effortless way that made other women study her like a puzzle they couldn't solve. But tonight, she was nervous. And Elena was never nervous. "You're quiet," she said. And her voice had that careful quality to it, like she was testing the ice on a frozen lake. Am I? I cut into my steak, watching the pink center bleed across the white plate. Just tired, I guess. Long week, Marcus. It's Tuesday. I smiled. Then it's going to be a very long week. She didn't laugh. Elena used to laugh at everything I said. Back when we first met. Back when I was the ambitious young architect who sketched our future on napkins and coffee shops. And she was the marketing executive who believed in every line I drew. That was 7 years ago. Somewhere between the mortgage and the promotions, between the dinner parties and the business trips, we'd stopped sketching futures together. Now she just stared at me with those green eyes that used to make me forget my own name. And I could see something moving behind them. Something guilty, something afraid. "I need to tell you something," she said. And there it was. The sentence that changes everything. The sentence that splits your life into before and after. Like a fault line cracking through bedrock. I should have felt something: panic, anger, that hot rush of adrenaline that comes when you know the ground is about to drop out from under you. But instead, I felt calm. Eerily calm. Because I already knew. I'd known for 3 weeks, 2 days, and approximately 6 hours. Ever since I'd come home early from the conference in Boston and found her laptop open on the kitchen counter, a messaging app I didn't recognize glowing on the screen. Ever since I'd seen the messages from Dee talking about how he couldn't stop thinking about last Tuesday, about the hotel in Manhattan, about how she tasted like honey and regret. I'd stood there in our kitchen, still holding my suitcase, reading messages that described my wife's body in ways I hadn't touched her in months. And I'd felt something inside me go very, very quiet. Not dead, not broken, just quiet. "What do you need to tell me?" I asked. And my voice sounded like it was coming from someone else's throat. She looked down at her untouched risotto. "I've been Marcus. There's no easy way to say this, then say it the hard way." Her eyes snapped up to mine, and I saw surprise there. Elena was used to me being gentle, accommodating, the guy who smoothed over rough edges and kept the peace. She wasn't used to this version of me, the one who'd spent 3 weeks learning to be stone. "I've been seeing someone," she said, and the words came out in a rush, like she'd been holding her breath underwater. "From work. It's Daniel. Daniel Whitmore, my boss." There it was, the confession I'd been waiting for. Spoken into the expensive air of a restaurant where the waiters glided like ghosts and nobody made scenes. I took a sip of my wine, a Bordeaux that cost more than my first car, and let the silence stretch between us like taffy. "How long?" I asked. "Does it matter?" "Yes," she flinched. 4 months. 4 months. 120 days of coming home and kissing me hello with lips that had been on another man. 120 days of lying next to me in bed and probably thinking of him. 120 days of me being the fool who didn't see, didn't know, didn't suspect. Except I had suspected. I'd known deep down. The way you know when a building's foundation is cracked even before the walls start to show it. The late nights at the office, the new lingerie that never made appearances in our bedroom, the way she'd started going to the gym 5 times a week and coming home smelling like expensive soap I hadn't bought her. Daniel Whitmore, CEO of Whitmore Industries, the tech giant where Elena had worked her way up from junior marketing associate to VP of brand strategy. 45 years old, married to some socialite I'd seen in magazine spreads, owner of a penthouse in Tribeca and a house in the Hamptons. The kind of man who wore success like cologne. "Are you in love with him?" I asked. Elena's face did something complicated. "Marcus, simple question, Elena. Are you in love with him?" "I don't know," she whispered. "I don't know what I feel anymore. I just know that when I'm with him, I feel alive, like I matter, like I'm not just a wife." The words hit like a slap, clean and sharp. I set down my fork with exaggerated care, watching the silver catch the candlelight around us. Other couples laughed and clinkied glasses, living in their before moments, not yet knowing their fault lines were forming. "What do you want, Elena?" She looked at me with something that might have been hope or might have been relief. I want a divorce. And there it was, the nuclear option delivered between the main course and dessert. I should have seen it coming. Hell, part of me had seen it coming, but hearing it spoken out loud was different. It made it real. It made it a thing that was happening, not just a thing I suspected. Okay, I said. Her eyes widened. Okay, that's it. Just okay. What do you want me to say, Elena? You've clearly made up your mind. You've been sleeping with your boss for 4 months. You want a divorce. What exactly am I supposed to do? Beg you to stay? Fight for a marriage you've already left. I thought she trailed off, and I realized she'd expected me to crumble, to cry, to make a scene, to give her the dramatic confrontation that would justify everything, that would make me the bad guy in whatever story she'd been telling herself. But I'd learned something in those 3 weeks of silent knowing. I'd learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is refuse to perform the role someone's written for you. I'll have my lawyer contact yours, I said, signaling for the check. We can work out the details civilly. No need to make this uglier than it already is. Marcus, I don't. I held up a hand. Please don't. You've said what you needed to say. Let's leave it at that. The waiter brought the check on a small silver tray, and I paid for the meal that would be our last together as husband and wife. $347 for the privilege of having my marriage officially ended over overpriced seafood and undercooked honesty. We drove home in silence. Elena's fingers twisting her wedding ring, the platinum band I'd saved for 6 months to buy. Back when I thought forever meant something. When we pulled into our driveway, she turned to me. I'll stay at my sister's tonight. She said, give you some space. That's probably for the best. She got out of the car and I watched her walk to her own vehicle, the Mercedes SUV that Daniel had probably helped her pick out or maybe even bought for her. I wouldn't have known. I'd stopped keeping track of where her money came from months ago, when I'd stopped being able to afford the mental arithmetic of our dissolving life. Inside the house, our house, soon to be my former house, I poured myself a scotch and sat in the leather chair by the window. The one Elena always said made me look like an old man. I stared out at the street, at the other houses with their warm lights and their intact families, and I felt that quiet thing inside me start to shift. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't even anger. Not really. It was something colder, something more deliberate. I pulled out my phone and opened the private folder where I'd been collecting information for the past 3 weeks. Screenshots of messages, credit card statements showing hotel charges, calendar entries that didn't match her supposed work schedule, a photograph I'd taken of her car parked outside a boutique hotel in Soho. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a day she told me she was in meetings until 6 o'clock. I'd been gathering evidence like a man preparing for war, even though I hadn't known what kind of war I was planning to fight. But now, sitting in the quiet of a house that would soon be divided and sold, I began to understand. This wasn't about winning Elena back. That ship had sailed the moment she'd slid into Daniel Whitmore's bed. This wasn't even about revenge. Not in the traditional sense. This was about dignity, about refusing to be the cuckold who never knew, the fool who got played while everyone else whispered and pied. About taking back some measure of control in a situation where I'd been powerless. I opened my laptop and started researching. Daniel Whitmore, 45, CEO, net worth estimated at $200 million, married to Victoria Whitmore née Ashford, daughter of the Ashford Hotel dynasty. One daughter, away at boarding school in Switzerland. Victoria Whitmore. I clicked on her Instagram profile, public. Surprisingly for someone of her social standing, photos of charity galas and museum openings. Photos of her at art galleries and wine tastings. Photos that grew less frequent over the past year. I noticed photos where her smile never quite reached her eyes. She was beautiful in a different way than Elena. Where Elena was all sharp angles and calculated glamour, Victoria had a softer quality. Dark hair that fell in waves past her shoulders, eyes the color of expensive chocolate, a smile that looked like it had forgotten how to be real. In her most recent photo posted 3 weeks ago, she stood alone on a beach somewhere, her hair whipping in the wind, staring out at the ocean with an expression I recognized. It was the look of someone who'd learned to be lonely in a crowded room. I stared at that photo for a long time, and something clicked into place. A plan so audacious, so perfectly balanced between justice and cruelty that I almost laughed. If Daniel Whitmore wanted to take my wife to dismantle my marriage while building his empire and maintaining his perfect public image, then I would return the favor. Not with anger, not with violence, but with something far more elegant. I would take his wife, not seduce her, nothing so crude or predictable. No, I would do something far more dangerous. I would actually see her, know her, understand her in ways her husband clearly didn't. I would offer her what Daniel had offered Elena. The feeling of mattering, of being alive, of being more than just a wife. And when it was done, when the fallout came, I would make sure Daniel Whitmore understood exactly what it felt like to be replaced. I closed my laptop and finished my scotch, feeling something like purpose settle into my bones. Outside, snow had started to fall. The first snow of the season, covering everything in white, clean, fresh, like the world resetting itself. Tomorrow, I would start my research. I would learn everything about Victoria Whitmore, her patterns, her interests, her weaknesses. I would find a way into her orbit that seemed natural, coincidental. I would be patient, meticulous. I would build this carefully, brick by brick, the way I built buildings with intention and precision. But tonight, I sat in the quiet of my ending marriage and let myself feel the cold clarity of someone who'd found their purpose. The snow fell heavier, muffling the sounds of the city, and in that silence, I began to plan my resurrection. The law offices of Morrison and Price occupied the 34th floor of a building I'd helped design 5 years ago. There was a certain poetry in that, conducting the dissolution of my marriage in a structure I'd created, watching my life be divided into assets and liabilities beneath ceilings I'd sketched in rooms where light fell through windows I'd positioned for maximum impact. Jeremy Morrison had been my lawyer since I'd started my firm. He was the kind of attorney who wore expensive suits but kept his sleeves rolled up, who billed by the hour but never made you feel like you were watching the meter run. When I called him the morning after Elena's confession, he'd cleared his schedule immediately. "Marcus," he said now, sliding a folder across his mahogany desk. "I've drawn up a preliminary assessment based on what you've told me. It's not pretty." I opened the folder. Numbers swam across the page. The house, our savings accounts, Elena's stock options, my retirement fund, the vacation property in Vermont we'd bought 3 years ago and visited exactly twice. 7 years of accumulated life reduced to spreadsheets and estimated values. New York is an equitable distribution state, Jeremy continued, steepling his fingers. Which means the court divides marital property fairly, not necessarily equally, given that Elena's income has exceeded yours for the past 2 years, and there's no prenup. I could walk away with less than half potentially, though the affair could work in your favor, depending on how vindictive you want to be. He paused. How vindictive do you want to be? I thought about that. The old Marcus, the one who'd existed 4 weeks ago, would have said he wanted to be fair, civilized, mature about the whole thing. But the old Marcus had also been blind to his wife's infidelity, complicit in his own cuckolding through sheer obliviousness. The new Marcus had different priorities. "I want what I'm entitled to," I said carefully. "Nothing more, nothing less. I'm not interested in destroying her financially. I just want out clean and clear." Jeremy studied me with the expression of a man who'd seen too many divorces to believe in clean and clear. "Most people in your position want blood." "I'm not most people." "No," he said slowly. "I don't suppose you are, though I have to ask Marcus, and feel free to tell me it's none of my business, but you seem remarkably calm about all this. Your wife of 7 years just told you she's been sleeping with her boss and wants a divorce. Most men would be falling apart." I was going to say visibly angry. I smiled and it felt like a foreign expression on my face. Something borrowed from a stranger. "Anger is expensive, Jeremy. It clouds judgment. Makes you do stupid things. I learned a long time ago that the best revenge is architecture." He raised an eyebrow. "Architecture? Building something better than what you had before. Creating something that lasts longer than the pain that inspired it." I stood, buttoning my coat. "How long until we can file? If you're serious about keeping this civil, I can have preliminary papers ready by next week, though. I'd recommend waiting until next week is fine. Send me the documents when they're ready." I left his office and stepped into the cold November air, watching people rush past on their lunch breaks, all of them carrying their own invisible burdens. Somewhere in this city, Elena was probably at her desk, pretending to work while texting Daniel. Somewhere, Daniel Whitmore was in a corner office running his empire and my wife simultaneously, believing he'd won some kind of prize. They had no idea what was coming. I pulled out my phone and opened the research document I'd been building. Over the past week, I'd learned more about Victoria Whitmore than most people knew about their own spouses. She wasn't just the trophy wife of a tech CEO. She was a former curator at the Museum of Modern Art, forced to give up her career when Daniel's company went public and required a full-time society wife. She sat on the boards of 3 charities, volunteered at a literacy program in Brooklyn, and had a master's in art history from Columbia. She also, according to a carefully worded profile in Manhattan Magazine from 6 months ago, felt deeply fulfilled by her philanthropic work, even if it meant setting aside her curatorial ambitions. The language of polite surrender. I recognized it because I'd used similar phrases myself when people asked how I felt about Elena's meteoric rise, while my own firm stayed comfortably small and sustainable. I'm happy for her success. I'd say someone has to keep the home fires burning. Both of us, it seemed, had become experts at lying about our own eraser. Victoria's Instagram showed a woman who attended the right events, wore the right clothes, smiled the right smiles, but there were cracks if you knew where to look. Photos of art exhibitions she attended alone. Check-ins at museums on weekday afternoons when most society wives were at lunch. A quote she'd shared 2 months ago from Virginia Woolf. Lock up your libraries if you like, but there is no gate, no lock, no bolt that you can set upon the freedom of my mind. A woman feeling caged. A woman hungry for something her gilded life couldn't provide. Perfect. My phone buzzed. A text from Elena. I've moved most of my things out. Left your grandmother's china set in the photo albums. Thought you'd want those. My lawyer will contact yours next week. No apology, no second thoughts, just logistics and the division of memory. I deleted the message without responding. Instead, I opened a different app, one I downloaded 3 days ago after extensive research into Victoria's patterns. It was called Art Connect, a social platform for art enthusiasts to discuss exhibitions, share recommendations, and organize viewing groups for gallery openings. Victoria Whitmore was an active member under the username Victoria A. Mama. She posted thoughtful critiques of new exhibitions, engaged in discussions about contemporary installation art, and occasionally organized small viewing groups for lesser-known galleries in Chelsea and the Lower East Side. Her most recent post from yesterday. Anyone interested in the new Rothko retrospective at Pace? Thinking of going Thursday evening? Always better to experience color field painting with others who appreciate the emotional architecture of it. Emotional architecture. The phrase struck me both for its pretension and its accuracy. Rothko had built cathedrals out of color, spaces designed to make you feel rather than think. I'd always admired that. The idea that you could construct emotion the way you constructed buildings with intention and precision. I created an account. Username Marcus Architect. Profile picture. A photo of me at a building site. Thoughtful and professional. Nothing try hard about it. Bio. Architect by trade. Student of space and light. Believer in the emotional geometry of well-designed environments. Then I commented on her post. Rothko understood that architecture isn't just about physical space. It's about creating environments for contemplation. Would love to join if there's room. Always fascinating to see his work with people who understand the structural component of his compositions. I hit send and felt something like electricity run through me. Not guilt. I'd moved past guilt somewhere around the second week of knowing about Elena's affair. This was something different. Anticipation. The feeling of a plan beginning to move from blueprint to foundation. My phone buzzed within minutes. Victoria, a mom. Love that perspective. Most people focus purely on the emotional without recognizing the architectural precision of his color blocks. Absolutely. Join us planning to meet at the gallery entrance at 6 p.m. Thursday. Fair warning, I tend to spend at least an hour in front of each major piece. Patience required. I smiled. Marcus, Architect. Patience is the foundation of appreciation. See you Thursday. 3 days. 3 days to prepare, to research, to ensure that when we met, I would be exactly what she needed me to be. Not a seducer, not a player, just a man who saw her, really saw her in ways her husband had stopped seeing her years ago. I spent those 3 days becoming an expert on Rothko. I read critical essays and artist biographies. I visited the MoMA to stand in front of his work and understand what drew Victoria to these massive canvases of color. I learned about his suicide, his depression, his belief that his paintings were dramas meant to evoke profound human emotions. I also learned everything I could about Victoria herself. Not just the public information, but the traces she left across the internet like breadcrumbs. A blog she'd abandoned 3 years ago, where she'd written eloquently about the intersection of art and memory. A YouTube channel with only 2 videos, both from 4 years ago, where she'd given tours of MoMA exhibitions with the kind of passion that made you understand why she'd chosen this career. In one video, she stood in front of a Pollock drip painting, and her whole face transformed. People think this is chaos, she said, gesturing at the canvas. But look closer. There's intention in every splatter, structure, and the apparent randomness. Pollock didn't just throw paint. He built these pieces like symphonies. Each gesture deliberate. It's not chaos. It's controlled passion. I watched that video 5 times. Studying not the art, but her. The way her hands moved when she talked, like she was conducting music only she could hear. The way her voice softened when she described technique grew stronger when she defended the artist's vision. The way she looked at the painting like it was a person she loved. This was not a woman who'd given up her career willingly. This was a woman who'd been convinced to trade her passion for security, her voice for a social position. And now she was spending her days at charity luncheons and her nights at her husband's business dinners, slowly disappearing behind the role of Mrs. Daniel Whitmore. I understood that disappearance. I'd been vanishing myself for years, becoming smaller and quieter as Elena's star rose. The understanding husband, the supportive partner, the man who didn't mind that his wife was her boss because, hey, at least someone found her exciting. Thursday arrived cold and clear. I dressed carefully, dark jeans, a cashmere sweater, a wool coat that looked expensive without being ostentatious. The goal was to appear successful but not showy, cultured but not pretentious. I wanted to look like someone who belonged in her world without trying too hard to impress. The Pace Gallery stood in Chelsea, all glass and white walls, the kind of space designed to make art the only thing that mattered. I arrived 15 minutes early and bought the exhibition catalog, studying it in the lobby like I was preparing for an exam. At 5:58 p.m., she walked in. Victoria Whitmore was more striking in person than in photographs. She wore a charcoal dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage, paired with a burgundy coat and simple jewelry. But it was her face that caught me, intelligent eyes, a mouth that looked like it was used to holding back opinions, and something in her posture that suggested both confidence and careful constraint. She was alone. I watched her scan the small group gathered near the entrance. 4 other people all looking at their phones. When her eyes landed on me, there was a flicker of assessment, quick and thorough. Then she smiled, and I understood why Daniel had married her. It wasn't just beauty. It was the way that smile made you feel like you'd earned something valuable. "Marcus," she said, approaching with her hand extended. "I'm Victoria. I recognize you from your profile picture." Her handshake was firm, professional. Up close, I could see fine lines at the corners of her eyes. The kind that came from years of smiling at things that didn't make you happy. "Thank you for organizing this," I said. "I've been wanting to see this exhibition properly. Went through it quickly last month, but it deserves more attention." "You've been before." Something in her voice sharpened with interest. "What did you think?" "Overwhelming in the best way, like standing inside emotion rather than looking at it, but I felt like I was rushing, trying to see everything at once. Sometimes you need to sit with discomfort to really understand it." She studied me for a moment, and I saw the exact instant she decided I wasn't just another dilettante. That's exactly it. Most people want art to be comfortable, to give them easy answers. But Rothko's work requires you to surrender to the uncertainty. The other members of her group approached 2 women in their 50s who looked like they collected art for investment purposes, and a young man who immediately started talking about color theory in a way that suggested he'd just discovered it. Victoria listened politely, but I could see her attention fragmenting. We moved into the exhibition space as a group, but within 20 minutes, the natural separation occurred. The investors moved quickly through the rooms, checking off paintings like items on a shopping list. The young man got absorbed in taking photos for Instagram, and Victoria and I found ourselves standing in front of a massive canvas of deep reds and blacks alone in a room designed for solitude. "No, 1960, she said softly. "One of his last major works before his death. You can feel it the way the darkness is consuming the red. He knew he was drowning. Or maybe he was learning to breathe underwater." I said, "Sometimes what looks like drowning is just a different way of existing." She turned to look at me. "Really, look at me." And I felt the weight of her attention. "That's an optimistic reading." "Is it?" I think Rothko knew exactly what he was doing. He was building spaces for people to bring their own meaning. If we see drowning, maybe that says more about us than about him. A small smile played at her lips. "You sound like you've spent time thinking about this." "I spend a lot of time thinking about how space affects emotion. Occupational hazard of being an architect." "What kind of architecture?" "Residential, mostly custom homes, some commercial projects. I like the intimate scale, designing spaces where people actually live, not just work or visit. There's something about creating the container for someone's daily life that feels significant." We moved through the exhibition slowly, and I noticed how she positioned herself in front of each painting, not straight on, but slightly to the side, as if approaching the art from an angle. When I asked about it, she laughed. "Old curator habit. You see different things when you shift your perspective. The way light hits the canvas changes. Colors reveal undertones. Most people plant themselves dead center and think they're seeing everything, but they're only getting one version of the truth. And you prefer multiple versions. I prefer acknowledging that there are multiple versions. Truth is positional. It changes depending on where you're standing." We were alone in the final room, a space dominated by a massive canvas of deep burgundy and black. The silence felt deliberate, constructed. I could hear her breathing, slow and measured. "Can I ask you something?" She said, still looking at the painting. Why did you really want to come today? The question surprised me with its directness. I'd expected small talk, gradual building of rapport, but Victoria Whitmore, it seemed, wasn't interested in the usual social choreography. Honestly, I said, I'm going through a divorce. My wife told me 2 weeks ago that she's been having an affair with her boss, and I realized that I'd been living in a very small space for a very long time, metaphorically speaking. I needed to remember what it felt like to experience something larger than my own anger. I watched her face carefully. The confession was calculated, vulnerable enough to be human, specific enough to be believable, and designed to create a sense of intimacy through shared pain. What I didn't expect was the way her expression shifted not to pity, but to recognition. I'm sorry, she said. I'm sorry you're going through that. Thank you, though. I'm finding that sometimes things have to fall apart before you realize they were barely holding together in the first place. She nodded slowly and I saw her hand move unconsciously to her wedding ring. Twisting it the way Elena used to twist hers, a gesture of discomfort, of doubt. My husband is having an affair, too, she said quietly. And the words fell into the space between us like stones into still water. I don't have proof, but I know. You always know, don't you? Even when you pretend you don't. And there it was. The crack in the perfect facade. The truth she'd been carrying alone, probably for months, with no one to tell because admitting it would mean admitting that her carefully constructed life was a performance. I turned to face her fully. Yes, I said. You always know. We stood there in the silence of Rothko's final room. Two people who'd been betrayed. Two people who understood what it meant to be erased by someone else's desire. Around us, the deep red walls seemed to pulse with a heartbeat that wasn't our own. Would you like to get coffee? I asked. I feel like we've both earned something stronger than gallery wine. She smiled, a real smile this time. One that reached her eyes. Yes, God. Yes. I know a place nearby that stays open late. They have excellent bourbon. As we left the gallery together, stepping out into the cold November evening, I felt the foundation of my plan settling into place. Not through seduction, not through manipulation, but through something far more dangerous. Genuine connection. Victoria Whitmore was lonely. She was brilliant. She was trapped in a marriage to a man who was at this very moment probably in bed with my wife. And I was going to show her exactly what it felt like to be seen again. The bar Victoria chose was the kind of place you'd walk past 100 times without noticing a narrow door between a vintage bookshop and a closed dry cleaner. No sign, just a brass number plate that read 237. Inside, it opened into a space that felt like a secret. Exposed brick walls lined with leather-bound books, Edison bulbs casting warm pools of light, and a bar made from reclaimed wood that looked like it had stories embedded in every grain. I come here when I need to think, Victoria said, leading me to a corner booth half hidden behind a bookshelf. Daniel doesn't know about it. It's not the kind of place he'd appreciate. The way she said his name, Daniel, not my husband, told me everything I needed to know about the distance between them. A waitress appeared, young and efficient, with the kind of face that suggested she was between graduate programs and using this job to fund her real passion. Victoria ordered a bourbon. Neat. I did the same. So, Victoria said once the waitress had disappeared. Tell me about your wife. The directness was becoming familiar. Victoria Whitmore. I was learning. Didn't waste time on pleasantries when real conversation was available. It was refreshing and dangerous in equal measure. What do you want to know? Why did you marry her? I thought about that, not about what would sound good, but about the actual truth. Because I had the sense that Victoria could smell a lie from across the room. And more importantly, I was tired of lying because she made me feel like I was building something that mattered. I said Elena was as brilliant, ambitious. She had this way of seeing potential in everything, including me. When I met her, I was just another architect grinding away at someone else's firm, designing strip malls and restaurant renovations. She looked at my sketches and told me I was wasting my talent on other people's mediocrity. 6 months later, I'd started my own firm. She pushed you. She believed in me. There's a difference. I paused as the waitress returned with our drinks. Or at least I thought there was. Now I wonder if she just saw me as another project, something to improve and optimize and eventually outgrow. Victoria lifted her glass, studying the amber liquid like it held answers. Daniel chose me because I looked good in photographs. Because I came from the right family, because I understood how to navigate the social architecture of his world. She took a sip and I watched her throat work as she swallowed. He needed a wife who could throw dinner parties and sit on charity boards and smile at investors. I needed God. I don't even remember what I thought I needed. Security, status, permission to stop fighting so hard. You gave up your career. Her eyes snapped to mine. How did you know that? You mentioned you were a curator. Past tense. And there's a way you talk about art like someone who's been exiled from a country they still consider home. She set down her glass with exaggerated care. You're observant. Occupational hazard. I spend my days noticing how people move through spaces, how environments affect behavior. You learn to read the signs. And what signs are you reading now? I leaned back, considering her. In the low light, she looked younger than her 42 years, but also more fragile somehow, like fine porcelain that had developed invisible cracks. I'm reading a woman who's been making herself smaller for years. Who's been editing her own thoughts before she speaks them, who comes to art galleries alone because it's the only place she can remember who she used to be. Victoria's expression didn't change, but I saw her fingers tighten around her glass. You don't know me well enough to make those assessments. You're right. I apologize. That was presumptuous. No. She shook her head and something in her face softened. No, you're not wrong. It's just strange to have someone name it so precisely. Most people look at my life and see nothing but privilege. The penthouse, the charity galas, the vacation home in Aspen. They think I have everything. But you gave up the thing that mattered most. Yes. The word came out like a confession. I was good at it. You know, curation. I had an eye for emerging artists. I could walk into a studio and know immediately if the work would resonate. I could build exhibitions that told stories that created dialogues between pieces that had never been in conversation before. It was like conducting an orchestra except with visual language instead of music. The passion in her voice was raw, unguarded. This was the Victoria from those YouTube videos. The one who spoke about art like it was oxygen. What happened? I asked, though I thought I knew. Daniel's company went public. Suddenly, we were worth $200 million on paper. And I was married to a CEO who needed a specific kind of wife. Not a working curator who spent her weekends in Brooklyn studios and came home with paint on her clothes. He needed someone who could host dinners for investors, who could make small talk with board members' wives, who could be photographed for magazine spreads about successful couples. So, you quit. So, I was strongly encouraged to redirect my energies toward philanthropic endeavors. Her voice had taken on a mimicking quality, like she was quoting someone. Probably Daniel. He made it sound so reasonable. Why work 60-hour weeks at the museum when I could be on the board of 3 different charities? Why exhaust myself building exhibitions when I could be funding emerging artists through our foundation? But it's not the same. It's not even close. She finished her bourbon and signaled for another. Writing checks isn't creating. Attending fundraisers isn't building something with your own hands. I sit in meetings and approve grants and smile for photographs, and every day I feel myself disappearing a little more. The rawness of it struck me. This wasn't the careful social performance of a society wife. This was a woman who'd been holding this inside for years. And suddenly, the dam had broken. When did you know he was having an affair? I asked. Victoria's second bourbon arrived. She took a long sip before answering. 6 months ago. We were at a company dinner. One of those interminable things where everyone drinks too much and pretends to enjoy each other's company. I went to find Daniel because the CFO's wife wanted to discuss some charity event. And I found him in his office with his VP of brand strategy. She paused. Elena, right? That's your wife's name. The confirmation hit me like a punch, even though I'd known. Hearing it spoken aloud, having the affair verified by the other betrayed spouse made it viscerally real in a new way. Yes, I said. Elena, they weren't having sex. Not then, at least. But I saw the way he looked at her, the way she laughed at something, he said, touching his arm, and I knew. You can tell the difference between normal flirtation and something that's already crossed a line. It's in the body language, the casual intimacy. Did you confront him? No. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. I went back to the dinner party and smiled and made small talk about fundraising strategies. I went home and slept next to him and pretended I hadn't seen anything. I've been pretending for 6 months. Why? The question hung between us heavy with implications. Why do any of us stay in marriages that have died? Why do we perform normally when everything underneath is rotting? Because leaving would mean admitting I made a mistake. Victoria said quietly. Admitting that I gave up my career, my identity, my entire sense of self for a man who can't even be bothered to hide his affairs competently. It would mean that my mother was right when she told me not to marry him, that my friends were right when they said I was throwing my life away, that I wasted the last 12 years building something that was hollow from the beginning. I understood that the sunk cost fallacy of failed marriages. We stay because leaving means admitting the investment was worthless, that all those years were a mistake. It's easier to pretend the foundation is solid than to acknowledge you've been living in a house of cards. What about you? Victoria asked, turning the question back. Why haven't you confronted your wife? You said she told you 2 weeks ago. But you seem very controlled about it. Most men would be destroying her car, screaming in public, making dramatic gestures that would only make me look pathetic. I shook my head. I spent the first week after I found out wanting to burn everything down. But anger is expensive. It costs you your dignity, your clarity, your ability to think strategically. So, you're thinking strategically. It wasn't a question. I'm thinking about what I want my life to look like on the other side of this. And I realized that getting revenge in obvious ways, slashing tires, sending angry emails, making scenes that just makes me the villain in her story, the jealous husband who couldn't handle her success. I don't want to be that character. Victoria studied me over the rim of her glass. So, what character do you want to be? The one who builds something better. The one who doesn't just survive, but actually lives. The one who proves that her leaving was the best thing that ever happened to me. By coming to art galleries and drinking bourbon with strangers. By remembering what it feels like to have a conversation about something that matters. By expanding my world instead of shrinking into my anger. By refusing to let her betrayal define my next chapter. She smiled, and this time it reached her eyes. That's admirably philosophical. It's admirably full of, I said. And she laughed a real laugh, surprised and genuine. I'm angry as hell. I'm hurt and humiliated. And some days I wake up wanting to destroy everything they've built together. But I also know that giving into that anger would only destroy me. So I'm channeling it into something more productive. Like what? I met her eyes. Like finding people who understand. Like building new connections that remind me I'm more than just the husband who got cheated on. Like proving to myself that I can still surprise myself. The air between us had shifted. We'd moved past small talk, past the careful social dance of strangers. We were in the territory of real conversation now. The kind that only happens when two people recognize something broken in each other. Can I tell you something? Victoria said. Something I've never told anyone. Of course. I'm glad he's having an affair. The words came out in a rush, like she'd been holding them inside for months. I know that makes me sound terrible, but I'm glad because it gives me permission to stop pretending. It gives me an exit that doesn't make me the bad guy. I can leave now and everyone will understand. The poor wife whose husband cheated. No one has to know that I was already gone long before he ever touched another woman. The confession was so honest, so raw that I felt something shift in my chest. This wasn't the society wife or the curator or the charity board member. This was just Victoria, a woman who'd been suffocating in a beautiful cage and had finally found the door. That doesn't make you terrible, I said. It makes you human, does it? Sometimes I think I'm a coward. That I should have left years ago when I first realized I was disappearing. But I stayed because it was easier. Because his money meant I didn't have to struggle. Because being Mrs. Daniel Whitmore opened doors that being Victoria Ashford never could. And now those doors lead to rooms I don't want to be in anymore. We sat in silence for a moment, and I felt the weight of what we were building here. Not a flirtation, not a rebound, but something more dangerous. A genuine understanding between two people who'd been betrayed in exactly the same way by exactly the same people. I should probably go, Victoria said. But she didn't move. Daniel will wonder where I am. Will he? No, probably not. He's likely working late or pretending to work late while he's actually with Elena. The name sat between us like a third person at the table. My wife and her husband somewhere in this city building their affair while we sat here drinking bourbon and sharing confessions. Can I ask you something potentially inappropriate? I said. Victoria raised an eyebrow. We're past the point of appropriate, I think. Do you want to stop him? The affair. Duh. She considered the question seriously. No. I want to be free of him, but I also want him to understand what he's losing. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. What about you? Do you want Elena back? God, no. The certainty in my voice surprised even me. I want her to live with the consequences of her choices. I want her to build a life with Daniel and slowly realize that she traded substance for flash. I want her to wake up one day and understand that she destroyed something real for something that only looks good in photographs. Victoria smiled. And there was something fierce in it. You're not as philosophical as you pretend to be. No one is. She finished her bourbon and set down the glass with finality. I should really go, but I'd like to do this again. If you're interested, I'm very interested. There's a gallery opening next Friday. Emerging artist from Brooklyn does these incredible installations with light and shadow. Very architectural, actually. You might appreciate it. I'd love to. We exchanged numbers, a simple transaction that felt weighted with significance. As we stood to leave, Victoria put her hand on my arm. "Thank you," she said, "for seeing me, for listening, for not pretending this is anything other than what it is." "What is it?" I asked. She smiled. "I don't know yet, but I think I want to find out." Outside, the November night had grown colder. We stood on the sidewalk, and I could see her breath forming clouds in the air. A town car pulled up her driver, presumably summoned while we'd been inside. "Good night, Marcus," she said. "Good night, Victoria." I watched her car disappear into Manhattan traffic, and I felt something like triumph settle into my bones. Not because I'd seduced her. I hadn't. Not really, but because I'd done something more dangerous. I'd made her feel seen, understood, valued, and that I was learning was a far more powerful weapon than anything crude or obvious. My phone buzzed. A text from Elena. "Lawyer says we should schedule mediation for next month. Can you do the 15th? I looked at the message for a long moment, then typed back. "The 15th works. Have a good evening, Elena." Polite, civil, completely devoid of the rage she probably expected. Then I pulled up my thread with Victoria and sent a simple message. "Thank you for tonight. Looking forward to Friday." Her response came within seconds. "Me too. Sleep well, Marcus." I walked home through the cold November streets, past restaurants where couples shared meals and bars where friends laughed over drinks, and I felt like I was walking towards something instead of away from it. The game had begun. Not a game of seduction or revenge, but something more elegant, a game of truth and connection, of seeing and being seen. Daniel Whitmore had taken my wife, and slowly, carefully, with patience and precision, I was going to show him what it felt like to lose something irreplaceable. Not his wife's body. That would be too easy, too predictable. Her soul, her attention, her belief that she mattered. I was going to give Victoria Whitmore back to herself, and in doing so, I was going to take everything from him. The week between Bourbon Confessions and the gallery opening passed in a strange state of suspension. I moved through my days with a clarity I hadn't felt in years, meeting with clients, drafting designs, filing divorce papers that felt less like an ending and more like permission to begin something new. Elena had moved out completely. Our house, my house now, though the lawyers were still arguing about it, felt different without her presence. Not emptier. Exactly. Cleaner, like removing clutter you didn't realize was weighing you down until it was gone. She'd taken her expensive coffee maker and her designer clothes, her collection of marketing books, and her framed magazine covers. She'd left the art we'd bought together, pieces I'd chosen that she'd never really liked, and the furniture for my grandmother. The division felt appropriate. She got the symbols of her success. I got the things with actual history. I spent the evenings researching. Not Victoria this time, but the artist whose opening we'd be attending. Sophia Chen, 32, MFA from Yale, known for installation pieces that played with light and architectural space. Her work had been described as hauntingly intimate and aggressively beautiful. The kind of contradictory praise that meant she was doing something interesting. I also researched Daniel Whitmore more thoroughly. Not just the public information, the Forbes profiles, and the TechCrunch articles, but the cracks in his perfect facade. A lawsuit from 3 years ago, settled quietly involving allegations of hostile work environment. An interview where he'd said his wife understood the sacrifices necessary for success. A photograph from a charity gala where Victoria stood 2 feet away from him, smiling at the camera while looking completely alone. The more I learned, the more I understood that Daniel Whitmore was a man who collected things, companies, status symbols, people. Elena was just his latest acquisition, younger, ambitious, hungry for the power he could provide. And Victoria had been the first acquisition, chosen for her pedigree and her ability to play the role he needed. Both women reduced to their utility. Both of us, their spouses, reduced to obstacles or footnotes. On Friday evening, I dressed with the same care I'd taken the previous week. Charcoal slacks, a navy sweater, a coat that looked expensive without screaming it. I studied myself in the mirror and saw a man who'd lost 20 pounds in the past month without trying, whose eyes had developed a sharpness they'd lacked before. Grief had carved something leaner out of me, something harder. The gallery was in Bushwick, occupying a converted warehouse that still had the bones of its industrial past. Inside, white walls soared 20 feet high, and Sophia Chen's installations filled the space with geometric patterns of light and shadow. Projectors cast moving images onto translucent screens suspended from the ceiling, creating layers of illumination that shifted as you walked through them. It was beautiful. It was also deeply unsettling the way the light never stayed still, the way you could never be certain what you were seeing was real or reflected. Victoria was already there when I arrived. She stood in front of a piece called Memory Palace, A maze of gauze screens onto which were projected images of empty rooms, doorways that led nowhere, windows that showed only more windows. She wore black, a simple dress that probably cost more than my car, but elegant in its restraint. Her hair was pulled back, exposing the line of her neck, and she'd foregone her wedding ring. I noticed that immediately, the absence of gold on her left hand. "Marcus," she said, turning as I approached. Her smile was genuine, reaching her eyes in a way that suggested she'd been looking forward to this. "You made it. I wouldn't miss it. This is extraordinary, isn't it?" She gestured at the installation. "Sophia's exploring the architecture of memory, how we build internal spaces to house our past, and how those spaces are never stable, always shifting, always being rewritten." We walked through the maze of screens together and I noticed how the other gallery goers gave Victoria space. Not because they didn't recognize her, several did. I saw the double takes, but because she projected an aura that suggested she was here for the art, not for networking. "How was your week?" she asked as we emerged from Memory Palace into a room where light fractured through suspended prisms, creating rainbow patterns on the floor. "Productive. Signed my divorce papers. Met with 3 new clients. Started designing a house for a couple in Connecticut who actually seemed to like each other." She laughed. "Setting the bar high, I see. After what we've been through, mutual affection feels aspirational." I paused in front of a piece called Fault Lines, a floor installation of broken mirrors arranged to create the illusion of depth. "What about you?" "I hired a private investigator." The words came out casually, but I could hear the tension underneath to document Daniel's affair. "I thought if I'm going to do this actually leave, I should have evidence. Even though New York is no fault, it helps in the court of public opinion." And then it turns out he's been having multiple affairs, not just with Elena. There's also a junior associate at his firm, a consultant he hired 6 months ago, and apparently a recurring thing with someone he met at a conference in Singapore. She said it calmly, but I could see her jaw tighten. 12 years of marriage, and I was naive enough to think it was just one woman. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Not surprised men like Daniel rarely stopped at one affair, but anger on Victoria's behalf. And something else, a recalculation. Elena wasn't special to him. She was just another acquisition. Another young, ambitious woman who thought she was different, who believed she'd won some kind of prize by catching the CEO's attention. She had no idea she was just rotating through his collection. "I'm sorry," I said, and meant it. "Don't be. It's clarifying. I spent months thinking I'd done something wrong. That if I'd been different somehow, he wouldn't have strayed. But this isn't about me at all. It's about him needing constant validation, constant conquest. I could have been perfect and it wouldn't have mattered. You deserve better than perfect. You deserve real." She looked at me then, really looked at me, and something passed between us. Not attraction exactly, though that was there too. Something deeper. Recognition, the understanding that we were both rebuilding ourselves from the rubble of marriages that had crumbled. "Come on," she said, taking my hand. "I want to show you my favorite piece." Her hand in mine felt significant. Not romantic, not yet, but intimate in a way that acknowledged we'd moved past strangers. We were becoming something else. Allies, confidants, 2 people constructing a new reality from the broken pieces of the old one. She led me to a smaller room at the back of the gallery. Inside, a single installation dominated the space. The weight of light, hundreds of glass orbs hung from nearly invisible wires, each containing a small LED that pulsed at different rhythms. The effect was mesmerizing, like standing inside a constellation surrounded by manufactured stars. "It's about how even beautiful things have weight," Victoria said softly. "How light itself exerts pressure. Nothing is ever truly weightless, even when it appears to be." We stood there in the dim room, surrounded by pulsing light, and I felt the truth of what she was saying. The beautiful facade of her marriage had weight. My relationship with Elena had weight. Even this, whatever this was becoming between us, had weight. "I've been thinking," Victoria said, still holding my hand, "about what you said last week, about building something better, about refusing to let betrayal define your next chapter. And I want to do that, too. But I don't know how. I've spent so long being Mrs. Daniel Whitmore that I'm not sure who Victoria is anymore. Without the title, without the role, who am I?" The vulnerability in her voice made me turn to face her fully. In the pulsing light of the orbs, her face looked younger, more uncertain. This was the woman underneath the perfect exterior, the one who'd been erased over 12 years of playing a part. "You're a woman who understands art well enough to stand in a room like this and explain why it matters," I said. "You're someone who chose bourbon over champagne, truth over performance. You're whoever you decide to be, Victoria. The question is, who do you want to become?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she looked up at the suspended orbs, watching their asynchronous pulsing. And I saw something shift in her expression. Decision, resolution. I want to curate again, she said, not as a hobby or a philanthropic endeavor. Actually curate, build exhibitions, work with artists, get paint on my clothes, and spend weekends in studios. I want to remember what it feels like to create something that matters. So do it. It's not that simple. Daniel will fight me. Not because he cares about my career, but because it threatens the image. The CEO's wife isn't supposed to have her own ambitions. She's supposed to be decorative and supportive and content with being an accessory. Then don't tell him. Start small. Build it quietly until it's too substantial to tear down. She smiled. You make it sound possible. It is possible. I started my firm while working full-time for someone else. Nights and weekends for 2 years before I could afford to leave. It was exhausting, but it was mine. That mattered more than anything else. How do I even start? I thought about that. About the practical steps of reclaiming a career you'd abandoned. You still have contacts in the art world. Some, though I've been out for so long, I'm not sure they'd take me seriously. Then make them take you seriously. Find an emerging artist who needs an advocate. Someone whose work you believe in but who doesn't have gallery representation. Curate a small show independently. Rent a space. Build the exhibition yourself. Prove you can still do this. Her eyes lit up. Like a pop-up exhibition. Exactly. Low overhead, high impact. If it works, you've got momentum. If it doesn't, you've learned something and you try again. Either way, you're moving forward instead of staying frozen. You've thought about this. I've thought about a lot of things lately, mostly about how to build a life that's actually mine, not some compromised version that makes other people comfortable. Victoria squeezed my hand. Thank you for this, for seeing possibilities instead of just obstacles. That's what architects do. We look at empty space and imagine what could be built there. We stood there for a moment longer, surrounded by pulsing light, and I felt the weight she'd mentioned. This connection we were building had gravity. It was pulling us towards something that couldn't be easily categorized or controlled. Victoria, we both turned. A man approached 50's expensive suit. The kind of confident stride that suggested he owned things. He smiled at Victoria with the familiarity of old acquaintance. Richard Caldwell, Victoria said, and I heard her voice shift into her society wife register. Warmer but less genuine. I didn't know you were interested in installation art. I'm interested in investments, he said, glancing around the room. Sophia Chen's work is generating buzz. Thought I'd see what the fuss was about. His eyes moved to me. Richard Caldwell. I run an art advisory firm. Marcus Bennett, architect. We shook hands and I could feel him evaluating me, trying to place me in Victoria's social ecosystem. Friend, lover, business associate. Marcus has been educating me on the architectural elements of Sophia's work, Victoria said smoothly. The way she uses space and light to create emotional geometry. Fascinating. Richard's tone suggested it was anything but. Victoria, I've been meaning to reach out. I heard a rumor you might be getting back into curation. Any truth to that? I felt Victoria tense beside me. Where did you hear that art world gossip? You know how it is. Someone mentioned you'd been asking questions about available gallery spaces. He smiled. If you're serious about coming back, we should talk. I've got several clients looking for curators for private collections. I'll keep that in mind, Victoria said noncommittal. Enjoy the exhibition, Richard. It was a dismissal, politely delivered, but unmistakable. Richard took the hint, nodded at both of us, and drifted toward another installation. Private collections, Victoria said once he was out of earshot. Curating for rich people who want someone to tell them what art they should buy to impress their friends. That's not what I want. What do you want? To build something that matters. To work with artists who are creating because they have to, not because it's profitable. To curate exhibitions that change how people see the world, even if it's just for an hour. She turned to me. Is that naive? Am I too old to still believe in that kind of idealism? You're asking the wrong person. I'm the architect who turned down a partnership at a major firm because they wanted me to design identical luxury condos for the rest of my career. Idealism might be naive, but pragmatism is soul-crushing. She laughed, and the sound echoed in the small room. We're a pair, aren't we? Two middle-aged idealists trying to remember who we were before we started compromising. I prefer to think of us as people who are finally done compromising. Is that what we are? The question hung in the air between us, weighted with possibility. We were standing close now, close enough that I could smell her perfume, something subtle and expensive that suited her. Close enough that I could see the fine gold flecks in her brown eyes. I think we're people who understand each other, I said carefully. Who recognize something broken in each other and aren't afraid of it. What that becomes. I think we're still figuring that out. And if it becomes something that complicates everything, then we deal with complications. But at least we'll be dealing with them honestly, which is more than our spouses gave us. Victoria looked up at the pulsing orbs, and in their reflected light, I saw her face soften. I should tell you something. Daniel's company is having a holiday party in 3 weeks. Big event, investors, board members, all the important people. He always expects me to be there playing the perfect wife. She paused. I'm thinking of not going or of going and telling him I want a divorce in front of everyone. I haven't decided which would be more satisfying. Is there a third option? What do you mean? I thought about it, about Daniel Whitmore and his affairs. About Elena and her ambition. About the perfect public image they were both invested in maintaining. About how much damage could be done not with explosions but with carefully placed cracks. Go to the party, I said. Be the perfect wife one last time. Smile and charm and play your role flawlessly. Let them think everything's fine. Why? Because the best revenge isn't dramatic confrontation. It's building something better while they're not paying attention. Let him be comfortable. Let him think he's won, that he has everything under control. And then when you're ready, when you've built your new life to the point where his opinion doesn't matter anymore, that's when you walk away. Victoria studied me for a long moment. That's cold. That's strategic. You've thought about this. Your own revenge. I mean, I've thought about a lot of things. I met her eyes, including the fact that Daniel's holiday party might be the perfect place to begin implementing some of those thoughts. Understanding dawned on her face. You want to come with me? I want to meet the man who's sleeping with my wife. I want to shake his hand and smile and let him think I'm just another guest. I want to see him and Elena together, playing their own perfect couple routine while knowing exactly what they're doing and having them have no idea that I know. That's cruel. Manipulative probably, but also deeply satisfying. Victoria's smile turned sharp. I can bring a guest. Daniel encourages it. Makes me look less like the neglected wife if I show up with company. He'll assume you're just some friend from the art world. He won't think twice about it. Perfect. Marcus. She put her hand on my chest and I could feel my heartbeat against her palm. What are we doing? Really? Honestly, I think we're giving each other permission to stop being victims, to take back some control, to remember what it feels like to be seen and valued. I covered her hand with mine. And maybe we're building something real in the process, something that isn't tainted by betrayal or compromise. Or maybe we're just two hurt people using each other to feel less broken. Maybe. Would that be so terrible? She considered that. No, I suppose it wouldn't. As long as we're honest about it. I'm always honest with you, Victoria. That's the whole point. We left the gallery together, stepping out into the cold December night. Brooklyn stretched around us, all industrial chic and converted warehouses, and I felt like we were standing at the edge of something significant. 3 weeks, Victoria said, until the party. Until we walk into Daniel's world and smile at him and Elena like we don't know they're destroying our marriages. 3 weeks. I should start planning what to wear. Something that makes me look devastating. You already look devastating. She smiled. You're good at this. The compliments that feel genuine because they are. I only say what's true. We stood on the sidewalk and I could see her breath forming clouds in the cold air. She looked beautiful and fierce and fragile all at once. A woman on the edge of becoming whoever she was going to be next. Good night, Marcus, she said. Good night, Victoria. I watched her car pull away and I felt something like anticipation settle into my bones. 3 weeks until I stood in Daniel Whitmore's penthouse, shook his hand, and began the careful work of showing him what it felt like to lose everything. 3 weeks to plan, to prepare, to sharpen myself into exactly the weapon this situation required. The game was accelerating, and I was ready. The mediation session was scheduled for a Tuesday afternoon in a conference room that felt designed to suppress emotion. Gray walls, gray carpet, a long table made of some wood composite material that looked expensive but had no soul. Even the coffee they served tasted gray, bitter, and forgettable, like the marriage we were here to dissolve. Elena sat across from me, flanked by her lawyer, a woman named Patricia Winters, who specialized in high net worth divorces and had a reputation for being ruthless in designer suits. Elena looked good. She always looked good, but there was a tightness around her eyes that suggested she wasn't sleeping well. Part of me, a small and petty part, was glad. My own lawyer, Jeremy Morrison, sat to my right, a folder thick with documentation in front of him. We'd spent the previous week preparing, going over every asset, every account, every piece of property we'd accumulated in 7 years of marriage. Thank you all for coming, the mediator said. Her name was Susan Chen, and she had the calm, measured tone of someone who'd witnessed hundreds of marriages end in rooms exactly like this one. I know this is difficult, but the goal today is to reach an equitable agreement that both parties can accept. Shall we begin with the primary residence? What followed was 3 hours of the most civilized dismemberment I'd ever witnessed. We divided our lives with spreadsheets and calculators, reducing years of shared history to dollar amounts and percentage splits. The house would be sold. Proceeds divided 60-40 in Elena's favor because she'd contributed more to the down payment. The vacation property in Vermont would go to her entirely. I had no interest in keeping a place we'd barely used, and she claimed to have emotional attachment to it, though I suspected it was more about the property value. My retirement accounts would be split according to some formula I didn't fully understand, but Jeremy assured me was fair. Elena's stock options from Whitmore Industries, the company where she worked, where she'd met her lover, were considered marital property, but would stay with her, balanced against other assets I'd receive. The whole process felt like watching surgeons divide a corpse. Clinical, precise, bloodless. What about the art collection? Patricia asked, consulting her notes. I'd like to keep most of it, I said. Elena never cared for any of the pieces except the abstract we bought in Miami. And that was more about the artist's reputation than the actual work. Elena's jaw tightened. That's not fair, Marcus. I appreciate art. You appreciate what art signals about your taste. There's a difference. I kept my voice even. Matter of fact, take the Miami piece. I'll keep the rest. She looked like she wanted to argue, but Patricia put a hand on her arm. They had a brief whispered conversation, and I watched Elena's face cycle through emotions, anger, frustration, something that might have been hurt before settling back into careful neutrality. Fine, she said. The Miami piece and the photographs from our trip to Japan. Those hurt more than I expected. We bought those photographs together in Kyoto from a street artist who captured light through temple windows. I'd loved them, but I also understood the strategic value of concession. Agreed. We moved through the remaining items with brutal efficiency. Furniture, kitchenware, books, electronics, all of it divided and cataloged like inventory in a warehouse. By the time we reached the final items, I felt hollowed out, as if the mediation had scooped away pieces of me along with the joint checking account and the dining room set. I think we've made excellent progress, Susan said, making notes on her tablet. I'll draft the preliminary agreement based on today's discussion and send it to both counsel for review. If everything looks acceptable, we can move toward filing the final papers. How long? Elena asked. Her voice sounded different. Smaller somehow, like she was beginning to understand what we were actually doing here. That this was real. Final. Assuming no complications, you could be legally divorced within 90 days. 90 days, 3 months by spring, I would be unmarried. By spring, Elena would be free to pursue whatever future she imagined with Daniel Whitmore, and I would be what? Free, broken, rebuilt. I wasn't sure yet, but I was beginning to have ideas. Thank you, Susan, Jeremy said, gathering his papers. We'll be in touch. As we stood to leave, Elena caught my arm. Marcus, can we talk just for a minute? Patricia looked like she wanted to object, but Jeremy nodded to me. I'll wait in the lobby. We stood in the hallway outside the conference room, and I realized this was the first time we'd been alone since the restaurant, since she'd told me she wanted a divorce, and I'd responded with calm instead of devastation. You seem different, she said. Divorce will do that. That's not what I mean. She struggled for words. You're handling this too well. It's unnerving. I almost laughed. Would you prefer me to be falling apart, making scenes, begging you to stay? No. But this cold, calculating version of you it's not you, Marcus. Maybe it's who I needed to become. Maybe the version of me you married was too accommodating, too willing to make myself smaller so you could shine brighter. She flinched. That's not fair. None of this is fair, Elena. Fair would have been you telling me you were unhappy before you started sleeping with your boss. Fair would have been you having the courage to end our marriage before starting a new relationship. Fair would have been a lot of things that didn't happen. I know you're right. I handled this terribly. She looked down at her hands, manicured, perfect. No longer wearing her wedding ring, but I need you to understand that this wasn't about you. You didn't do anything wrong. I'm aware this was about you wanting something I couldn't give you. Power, excitement, whatever Daniel Whitmore represents. It's not like that, isn't it? I leaned against the wall, studying her. Tell me something, Elena. When you're with him, do you feel like you matter? Like you're special? Or do you ever wonder if you're just another acquisition for a man who collects beautiful things? Her eyes flashed with anger. You don't know anything about my relationship with Daniel. I know he's married. I know he's 45 years old and you're 32. I know he has a pattern of affairs with younger women who work for him. I know his wife is a former museum curator who gave up her career to support his. And now he's trading her in for a newer model. How do you? She stopped. Realization dawning. You've been researching him. I've been educating myself about the man my wife left me for. It seemed prudent. I pushed off the wall. Enjoy the holiday party at his company next week. I hear it's quite the event. I started to walk away, but her voice stopped me. Marcus, wait. How did you know about the party? I turned back and I let myself smile. I pay attention, Elena. I always have. You just never noticed. I left her standing in the hallway and I could feel her eyes on my back as I walked toward the elevator. Jeremy was waiting in the lobby checking his phone. How'd it go? He asked. She's starting to realize I'm not the man she married. Is that a good thing? I think so. The man she married would have let her walk all over him. Would have signed whatever papers she wanted, taken whatever settlement she offered, and spent the next decade wondering what he did wrong. I pressed the button for the elevator. I'm not that man anymore. No, Jeremy said thoughtfully. I don't suppose you are. I spent the next 2 weeks preparing for Daniel Whitmore's holiday party with the same meticulous attention I brought to architectural projects, research, planning, consideration of every angle, every possible outcome. I learned everything I could about Whitmore Industries, the company Daniel had built from a small software firm into a tech giant worth billions. I studied his public appearances, watched interviews, read profiles. I learned how he spoke, how he presented himself, what mattered to him. Control, image, legacy. These were the pillars of Daniel Whitmore's identity. He wanted to be seen as a titan of industry, a visionary, a man who built empires. His personal life was carefully curated to support that image. The beautiful wife from Old Money, the penthouse in Tribeca, the memberships at the right clubs. Elena fit into that narrative perfectly. Young, ambitious, successful in her own right. Dating her or whatever they were doing enhanced his image as a powerful man who could attract the best. She probably thought she was using him to advance her career, to access power and influence. She couldn't reach on her own. Neither of them understood they were using each other. Building a relationship on ambition rather than anything real. It would collapse eventually, but that would take time. I didn't have time. And more importantly, I didn't want to just wait for their relationship to fail. I wanted to accelerate it, to plant seeds of doubt that would grow into cracks that would shatter everything they were building. But first, I needed to meet him. To look Daniel Whitmore in the eye and let him see me as just another guest at his party. Harmless, forgettable, not a threat. Victoria and I spoke every few days, phone calls that started as check-ins and evolved into long conversations about art and architecture, about our failing marriages, and our plans for afterward. She told me about the artist she was considering for her pop-up exhibition. I told her about a project. I was designing a house for a couple in Connecticut who wanted something that captured light the way a prism captures rainbows. We didn't talk much about the party. It hung between us like a storm on the horizon, inevitable and electric. The night before the event, she called me. I'm nervous, she said without preamble. About tomorrow, about bringing you into Daniel's world. About what happens when you see him and Elena together? About she trailed off. About what this means. I finished for her. Yes. I was in my home office surrounded by blueprints and sketches. Through the window, I could see snow beginning to fall. The third snowfall of the season, covering the city in white, clean, fresh, deceptive. Victoria, we don't have to do this. If you're not ready, it's not about being ready. It's about being terrified that once we start this, whatever this is, we can't go back. That we're crossing a line that will change everything. We've already crossed the line. The moment we sat in that bar and told each other the truth about our marriages, we crossed it. Tomorrow is just making it visible. And you're okay with that, with whatever comes after. I thought about Elena in the mediation room dividing our lives into assets and liabilities. I thought about Daniel Whitmore collecting affairs like other men collected watches. I thought about Victoria, brilliant and erased, trying to remember who she was before she became someone's wife. I'm more than okay with it. I said I'm ready to stop being invisible, to stop accommodating, to start building something that's actually mine, even if it's messy. Especially if it's messy. Perfect things are boring, Victoria. They're fragile. Messy things have character, strength, room to grow. She laughed softly. When did you become a philosopher? Around the same time my wife told me she'd been her boss for 4 months. Betrayal gives you clarity, does it? Because I still feel like I'm fumbling in the dark. Then let me be your light tomorrow night. Come to the party with me. Introduce me to your husband. Let me shake his hand and smile and be exactly the kind of harmless nobody he expects. And when it's over, when we've played our roles perfectly, we'll leave together and you'll remember what it feels like to have someone actually see you. Silence on the other end. Then what should I wear? Something that makes you feel powerful. Something that reminds you who you were before you started shrinking yourself to fit his life. I have just the thing. It's red. Daniel hates it. Says it's too bold, too attention-seeking. Perfect. Wear the red, Marcus. Yes. Thank you for this, for giving me permission to stop being who he needs me to be. You don't need my permission, Victoria. You never did, but you're welcome anyway. After we hung up, I sat in my office for a long time watching the snowfall. Tomorrow night, I would walk into Daniel Whitmore's penthouse. I would see Elena on his arm playing the role of his girlfriend or mistress or whatever she thought she was. I would watch them smile and touch and pretend they were something special. And I would feel nothing. Or at least I would show nothing, because the real play wasn't tomorrow night. Tomorrow was just reconnaissance. The real play would come later, when I'd learned enough about Daniel to understand exactly where to apply pressure. When Victoria had rebuilt enough of herself to walk away without looking back. When Elena had invested enough in her fantasy with Daniel that shattering it would actually cost her something. I was building this carefully, the way I build houses. Foundation first, structure, support beams. Only then the aesthetic details, the finishing touches that made it look effortless. Tomorrow I would lay another piece of foundation. I pulled out my phone and texted Victoria. Pick you up at 7. Her response came immediately. I'll be ready. Red dress and all. I smiled and returned to my blueprints. The Connecticut house was coming together beautifully. All light and angles. Spaces that flowed into each other naturally. A house for people who actually loved each other, who wanted to build a life together. I wouldn't have that. My marriage was ending in mediation rooms and divided assets. But I could build something else, something that mattered. I could build the kind of revenge that looked like resurrection. The next evening, I stood in front of my mirror and adjusted my tie charcoal gray silk that Elena had bought me 2 Christmases ago. I'd almost thrown it out in a fit of symbolic purging, but then decided against it. Wearing something she'd given me to the party where I'd meet her lover felt appropriately ironic. My phone buzzed. Victoria, driver's downstairs. Ready when you are. I took one last look at myself. The man in the mirror looked different than the one who'd sat in that restaurant a month ago, hearing his wife ask for a divorce. Leaner, sharper, harder somehow, but in a way that felt earned rather than bitter. This was the new Marcus, the one who planned instead of reacted, who built instead of crumbled. I grabbed my coat and headed down. Victoria was waiting in the car, a black sedan with a driver who knew how to be invisible. She looked stunning. The red dress was a column of silk that hugged her body without being obvious about it. Elegant and bold at the same time. Her hair was down, falling in dark waves past her shoulders. She wore minimal jewelry, just diamond studs and a simple bracelet. She looked like someone who'd remembered how to be powerful. You wore the red, I said, sliding in beside her. I wore the red. She smiled, but I could see nervousness in her eyes. Last chance to back out. Not a chance. The driver pulled into traffic, heading toward Tribeca, toward Daniel Whitmore's penthouse, toward whatever came next. Victoria took my hand, and we sat in silence as the city slid past the windows. 2 people heading into a party where our spouses would be playing couple with each other. 2 people about to smile and pretend and lay the groundwork for something that would eventually shatter everything. Marcus, Victoria said quietly. Yes. Whatever happens tonight, promise me we'll be honest with each other. No games between us. Save the performance for them. I promise. No games, just truth. She squeezed my hand. Then let's go meet my husband. The car pulled up to a glass tower in Tribeca. All modern angles and expensive views. A doorman opened Victoria's door and we stepped out into the cold December night. Above us, I could see lights blazing from the penthouse floor. The party was already in full swing. I offered Victoria my arm and she took it. Together, we walked into Daniel Whitmore's world. The game had begun. The elevator was all mirrors and brushed steel, rising so smoothly, you couldn't feel the movement. Just the numbers climbing 45, 46, 47, and our reflection multiplying into infinity. Victoria and I side by side, dressed for battle, disguised as celebration. He'll be in the center of everything, Victoria said, watching the numbers climb. Daniel always positions himself where he can see everyone, where everyone has to pass by him at some point. It's strategic, makes people come to him. Control through architecture, I said. I understand that, the elevator chimed. 48th floor. The doors slid open onto a private foyer. More marble, more mirrors, a massive flower arrangement that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Through double doors ahead, I could hear the party, conversation and laughter, the clink of glasses, music carefully selected to be sophisticated without being intrusive. A server appeared with a tray of champagne. Victoria took a glass but didn't drink. I did the same. Props for the performance. Ready? She asked. Absolutely. We walked through the doors together and I got my first look at Daniel Whitmore's world. The penthouse was exactly what I expected. Floor-to-ceiling windows offering views of Manhattan that probably added $10 million to the property value. Minimalist furniture that looked uncomfortable but photogenic. Art on the walls chosen by advisors rather than passion. Everything was designed to impress. Nothing designed to comfort. There were perhaps 70 people scattered throughout the main room. All of them dressed in variations of expensive tech executives and their partners, board members, investors, the kind of people who measured success in zeros and thought influence was something you could buy. And there, exactly where Victoria said he'd be, standing in the center of it all like a sun around which everyone else orbited, Daniel Whitmore. He was tall, 6'2", maybe 6'3", with the kind of silver fox aesthetic that required expensive hair products and personal trainers, tailored suit, no tie that studied casualness that actually took more effort than formal dress. Handsome in a generic way, like he'd been designed by committee to appeal to the whitest demographic. And on his arm, laughing at something he just said, looking radiant and young and utterly comfortable in this world. Elena, my wife, almost ex-wife, the woman who'd shared my bed for 7 years and was now draped on another man like an accessory. She wore emerald green, her signature color, the one that made her eyes look more striking. Her hair was up, exposing the neck I used to kiss. She looked happy. That was the part that caught me. She looked genuinely happy in a way I hadn't seen in months, maybe years. I felt Victoria's hand tighten on my arm. That's her, she said quietly. Your wife? Yes. She's beautiful. Yes. Are you okay? I turned to look at Victoria, at this woman who was trusting me enough to bring me into her home to expose her own pain and solidarity with mine. And I felt something settle. Not calm exactly, more like clarity. I'm perfect, I said. Let's go meet your husband. We moved through the crowd and I watched how people reacted to Victoria. Some nodded with recognition. Others looked curious about her companion. The women evaluated my suit, my watch, trying to place me in their hierarchy. The men assessed me as potential competition or potential irrelevance. Let them wonder. As we approached, Daniel noticed Victoria. His expression shifted surprise, then something calculating, then a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Victoria, he said, and his voice was exactly what I expected. Confident, commanding, used to being heard. You came and you brought a guest, Daniel. Victoria's voice had gone cool, professional. This is Marcus Bennett. Marcus, my husband, Daniel Whitmore. I extended my hand. Daniel's handshake was firm, performative. The grip of a man who'd read articles about power dynamics and practiced in mirrors. Marcus Bennett, he said like he was filing the name away. What do you do, Marcus? I'm an architect, residential, primarily, some commercial work. Ah, the single syllable managed to convey both interest and dismissal. Are you involved in the arts? Is that how you know Victoria? We met at a gallery opening. I've always appreciated how architecture and visual art inform each other. Victoria has been generous enough to educate me on the finer points of curation. Daniel's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. He didn't like that the idea of his wife spending time educating another man, even about something as innocent as art, possessiveness disguised as casual interest. How nice, he said, then turning slightly. Elena, come meet Victoria's friend. And there she was, my wife. Close enough that I could smell her perfume different from what she used to wear. Something heavier, muskier, chosen for him, probably. Elena, Daniel said, his hands settling on her lower back with casual ownership. This is Marcus Bennett. He's an architect. Elena's face went absolutely white. I watched it happen in slow motion. Recognition, shock, fear, and then a desperate attempt to smooth her features back into neutrality, but it was too late. Daniel had seen the reaction, even if he didn't understand it yet. Marcus, she said, and her voice came out strained. What a surprise. I smiled. Easy, friendly. Like we were old acquaintances running into each other at a party. Elena, small world. Daniel's eyes narrowed. You two know each other. We've met, I said vaguely, enjoying watching Elena try to calculate the safest response. Professional circles. You know how it is in New York. Everyone's connected somehow. Victoria, bless her, played it perfectly. What a coincidence, though. I suppose in the architecture and design world, paths must cross frequently. Frequently enough, Elena said, still trying to regain her equilibrium. Her eyes were doing complicated mathematics, trying to figure out what I was doing here. How much I knew what I was planning. I let her wonder. Well, Daniel said, already losing interest now that the moment of surprise had passed. Enjoy the party, Marcus. Victoria, we should talk later about the Grayson Foundation Gala. They want you to co-chair again. Of course, Victoria said smoothly. Later, we moved away, drifting into the crowd, and I could feel Elena's eyes following us. Victoria steered us toward the windows, away from the center of the room. That was, she started enlightening. I finished. Did you see her face? I saw both their faces. Daniel knows something's off, even if he doesn't know what. And Elena looked terrified. Good. Victoria studied me. You're enjoying this, shouldn't I be? For the first time in months, I'm not the one off balance. I'm not the one caught in a lie. I walked into my wife's lover's home, shook his hand, smiled at him, and he has no idea who I am or what I know. I took a sip of champagne. Yes, Victoria, I'm enjoying this very much. Just remember, the goal isn't just to make them uncomfortable. It's to take back our lives. I know, but that doesn't mean I can't enjoy watching them squirm along the way. We spent the next hour circulating. Victoria introduced me to people from her world, museum directors and gallery owners, collectors and artists. I was charming and interested and completely forgettable. Just another +1 at a party full of important people. But I was also watching, studying. I watched how Daniel worked the room, how he touched Elena, possessive little gestures, his hand on her back, her shoulder, her waist, marking territory. I watched how Elena responded, leaning into him, laughing at his jokes, playing the role of the adoring younger woman who'd won the heart of a powerful man. I watched how Victoria navigated her own party like a stranger in her home. People greeted her politely but briefly, more interested in getting closer to Daniel. She was the CEO's wife, decorative but functionally invisible. And I watched how no one noticed the way Daniel's eyes lingered on a young woman from his marketing department. Or how he took a call and disappeared into his study for 15 minutes. Or how when he returned, Elena looked slightly less confident than before. Cracks, small ones, but visible if you knew where to look. Marcus. I turned to find a man in his 60s. Expensive suit. The kind of weathered handsomeness that suggested yacht clubs and golf courses. He extended his hand. Robert Ashford, Victoria's father. Ah, the Hotel Dynasty patriarch. Victoria had mentioned him in passing. Old money, old values. Deeply disappointed that his daughter had given up her career. Marcus Bennett, sir, pleasure to meet you. You're the architect Victoria's been spending time with. It wasn't a question. We've been to a few gallery openings together. Yes. Robert studied me with shrewd eyes that suggested he'd built his fortune by being underestimated. My daughter seems happier lately. More like herself. I don't suppose you have anything to do with that? I hope so, sir. She's been generous enough to share her knowledge of the art world. It's been illuminating. Has it? He glanced across the room to where Victoria was talking with a museum director. She was brilliant, you know, as a curator. Had a real eye. Could have been one of the greats if she'd stayed with it. She still could be perhaps. He turned back to me. Daniel's having an affair with someone here tonight. Probably multiple someones. I assume you know that. The directness surprised me. I had suspected. And you're still here at his party shaking his hand and drinking his champagne. I believe in understanding the terrain before making any moves. Rushing and angry would be satisfying for about 5 minutes, but building something strategic, something that lasts, that requires patience. Robert smiled. You know, I think I like you, Marcus. My daughter could use someone who thinks strategically. He glanced at his watch. I'm too old for these things. Tell Victoria I said goodbye and that I'd like to have dinner with both of you next week. I want to hear more about these gallery openings you've been attending. He left before I could respond, and I watched him make his way to the elevator. An ally potentially, or at least someone who wouldn't stand in the way if Victoria decided to blow up her marriage. Making friends. I turned to find Victoria beside me. 2 fresh glasses of champagne in her hands. She offered me one. Your father is interesting. He's direct. Think subtlety is for people who aren't confident in their positions. She sipped her champagne. What did he say? That he wants to have dinner with us next week. And that you were brilliant as a curator. Her expression softened. He never wanted me to marry Daniel. Told me I was trading my future for financial security. I thought he was being old-fashioned, that he didn't understand modern relationships. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Turns out he understood perfectly. It's not too late, to go back to curation, isn't it? I've been out of the field for 12 years. The art world moves fast. I'm probably obsolete. Or you're experienced, mature, you have connections and knowledge that younger curators don't. You just need to remember how to use them. Before she could respond, a commotion near the center of the room drew our attention. Daniel's voice raised slightly above the conversational hum. Absolutely not. I've told you before that project isn't happening. We moved closer. Daniel stood facing Elena, his jaw tight with barely controlled anger. Around them, other guests had gone quiet, pretending not to listen while straining to hear every word. I'm just saying, Elena said, her voice measured but with an edge underneath, that the market research supports expansion into Southeast Asia. If we wait another quarter, I don't pay you to question my decisions, Elena. I pay you to execute them. Daniel's smile was sharp. Or have you forgotten what your actual role is? The condescension in his voice was breathtaking. This was how he spoke to her. Not as a partner, not even as a valued employee, but as someone whose primary function was to agree with him and look good doing it. Elena's face flushed around them. I could see people exchanging glances. This wasn't professional disagreement. This was something more personal, meaner. Of course, Elena said finally, her voice tight. I apologize for overstepping. Good. Daniel's hand went to her waist, possessive and dismissive at the same time. Now smile. People are watching. She smiled. It didn't reach her eyes. Victoria and I exchanged a look. This was the man Elena had destroyed our marriage for. This was the relationship she thought was worth blowing up 7 years of shared history. I need air, Victoria said quietly. Come with me. We made our way to a terrace empty in the December cold, overlooking the city lights. Victoria leaned against the railing and I watched her shoulders shake. Victoria, I'm not crying, she said. I'm laughing. Did you see that? Did you see how he spoke to her? I saw. That's what she left you for. That's what I gave up my career for. Men who see us as accessories, as props in their perfect lives. She turned to me and her eyes were bright, but not with tears, with anger. I want him to hurt Marcus, not just lose me. I want him to actually feel something for once. Even if it's just the humiliation of being left, I understood. The rage underneath her calm, the need for him to understand what he'd thrown away. Then let's make sure he does, I said. But carefully, strategically, we build the foundations first. We make sure when we walk away, we're walking towards something better, not just away from something bad. How long? However long it takes, weeks, months, we do this, right? She nodded. I can wait. I've been waiting 12 years. What's a few more months? Through the glass doors, we could see the party continuing. Daniel holding court. Elena at his side with that brittle smile. All of them playing their roles, maintaining appearances, pretending everything was perfect. We should go back in, Victoria said. Can't have people thinking we're hiding. One more minute. I pulled out my phone and took a photo of the view. The city sprawling below us, lights spreading in every direction. I want to remember this moment when we decided to stop being victims. Victoria moved beside me and I took another photo. Both of us, the city behind us, something determined in our expressions that hadn't been there before. Send me that, she said. I will. We went back inside. The party had shifted. People were starting to leave. The energy winding down. Daniel was saying goodbye to a group of investors. Elena still attached to his side. As we approached to say our goodbyes, Daniel turned to us. Leaving already? I have an early morning, I said. Thank you for having me. Beautiful home. Marcus is designing a house for a couple in Connecticut, Victoria added. Custom work, very innovative use of light and space. Sounds fascinating, Daniel said in a tone that suggested the opposite. His attention had already moved past me to someone else. Victoria, don't forget about the Grayson Gala. I won't. Elena caught my eye as we turned to leave. Her expression was complicated fear, confusion, something that might have been plea. I smiled at her, friendly and empty. Nice to see you again, Elena. Enjoy your evening. In the elevator going down, Victoria took my hand. That was harder than I expected, she said. Which part? All of it. Seeing him with her, watching him be cruel to her, and knowing I used to make excuses for that behavior, pretending everything was fine when I wanted to scream. But you didn't scream. You were perfect, controlled, exactly what we needed. What happens now? Now we build. You start planning your pop-up exhibition. I keep designing houses for people who actually love each other. We become more ourselves and less the people they needed us to be. And slowly, carefully, we make them irrelevant to our happiness. And then we walk away and never look back. The elevator opened onto the lobby. We stepped out into the cold December night, and I felt something like freedom settling over me. We'd entered the lion's den. We'd smiled and played our roles and laid the groundwork for everything that would come next. And we'd walked out unscathed, stronger than when we went in. The game was accelerating, and we were winning. The days after the party felt electric, charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. I went through the motions of my normal life, meetings with clients, site visits, revisions to the Connecticut house design, but underneath it all, I felt like I was vibrating at a different frequency. Elena called 3 times the day after the party. I didn't answer. She left voicemails that progressed from confused to angry to something approaching desperate. "Marcus, what the hell were you doing at Daniel's party? Call me back. This is ridiculous. I know you're getting these messages. We need to talk. Please, just please call me. I need to understand what's happening." I deleted each one without responding. Let her wonder. Let her spiral. Let her feel a fraction of the uncertainty she'd put me through. Victoria texted that afternoon. "Elena's been trying to reach me. 5 calls so far. Should I answer?" I replied, "Your choice. But if you do, tell her the truth." We met at a gallery opening and became friends. Nothing more, nothing less. Nothing more. I stared at those 2 words for a long time before responding. Not yet. But we're building towards something, aren't we? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, yes, we are. That evening, I was in my home office working on the Connecticut design when my doorbell rang. I checked the security camera and saw Elena standing on my porch, arms wrapped around herself against the December cold. I considered not answering, but curiosity won out. When I opened the door, she pushed past me without invitation. "We need to talk." "Hello to you, too." She spun to face me, and I saw that the polished woman from the party had been replaced by someone fraying at the edges. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She wore jeans and a sweater instead of her usual designer armor. And there were circles under her eyes that suggested she hadn't slept well. "What were you doing at Daniel's party? Attending a party? Is that not allowed? Don't play games, Marcus. You know what I mean? How do you even know Victoria Whitmore? We met at an art gallery. Discovered we have similar interests. Started attending exhibitions together. I closed the door and leaned against it. Is that a problem? Yes, it's a problem. She's Daniel's wife and you're Daniel's mistress. Seems like we're all connected now, doesn't it?" Elena's face went white then red. "How long have you known about your affair?" "Since 3 weeks before you had the courage to actually tell me. I came home early from Boston, remember? Found your laptop open with messages from Dee describing in detail how you tasted." She sat down heavily on the couch, our couch, soon to be my couch. "According to the mediation agreement, Jesus Marcus, I save it. I'm not interested in apologies or explanations. What I am interested in is why you're here freaking out about me being friends with Victoria. Because it's weird. It's calculated. You're doing something." I almost laughed. "You mean the way you calculated your affair? The way you scheduled hotel rooms and deleted messages and lied to my face for 4 months? That's different." "How?" "Because she stopped, realizing there was no good answer. Daniel's going to be furious if he finds out you're my husband. Almost ex-husband. And why would he be furious? I thought I was the understanding spouse who didn't matter anymore. You're being deliberately difficult." "I'm being honest. Something you might try sometime." I moved to the bar cart and poured myself a scotch. Didn't offer her one. "Tell me something. Elena, does Daniel know you're here? That you're at your husband's house alone at night?" "I don't have to tell him everything." "Interesting. Does he know you still have keys to this house? That legally half of it's still yours for another 60 days? Her eyes narrowed. "What are you implying?" "Nothing. Just noting that you seem very concerned about Daniel finding out I exist, but not at all concerned about him knowing you're here, which suggests you haven't told him who I am. He knows I was married. He doesn't need to know the details like my name or that I'm friends with his wife." I sat down across from her. "Let me guess. He thinks you were married to someone boring and inconsequential. Someone you left because he couldn't keep up with your ambition. And you've let him think that because the truth that you're still legally married, that your husband is friendly with his wife, that makes things complicated. Stop it." "Stop what?" "Telling the truth. You spent months lying to me, Elena. I'm just returning the favor by being aggressively honest." She stood up, pacing. "Victoria Whitmore is not your friend. You're using her to get to Daniel." "Am I?" Or maybe Victoria and I are two people who were betrayed by our spouses and found comfort and shared experience. Maybe we actually like each other. Maybe not everything is a scheme. I don't believe you. I don't care. I finished my scotch. Is there anything else? Because I have work to do. Elena stared at me and I saw something like recognition in her eyes. You really have changed. The Marcus I married would never be this cold. The Marcus you married was a fool who didn't see. His wife was unhappy. Who accommodated and compromised and made himself smaller so you could shine brighter. That Marcus is gone. Elena, I killed him the night you asked for a divorce. And what are you now? Someone who builds his own life instead of supporting someone else's. Someone who doesn't apologize for taking up space. Someone who's done being invisible. She moved toward the door, then stopped. For what it's worth, I never meant to hurt you, but you did it anyway. Which tells me everything I need to know about what I was worth to you. After she left, I stood at the window and watched her drive away. My phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. Daniel just asked me about you, who you were, how we met, what you do. I told him the truth. He seemed satisfied but suspicious. I replied, good. Let him be suspicious. Let him wonder. It'll make him sloppy. Are you trying to make him jealous? I thought about that. Was I? Did I want Daniel Whitmore to see me as a threat? No. I'm trying to make him uncertain. There's a difference. Jealousy is emotional and predictable. Uncertainty is destabilizing. It makes people make mistakes. Victoria's response came quickly. You're scary when you're strategic. Is that a bad thing? No, it's exactly what I need right now. The following week, I met with Robert Ashford at his club, one of those old money institutions in Midtown, where the leather smelled like cigars and inherited privilege. He was waiting in a private dining room, reading the Wall Street Journal with the kind of attention that suggested he was evaluating investments. Marcus, he said, standing to shake my hand. Thank you for coming. I hope you don't mind. I thought it would be easier to talk without Victoria present. She can join us for dessert. Of course, sir. We ordered him the filt, me the salmon, and for the first few minutes, we made small talk about architecture and real estate. The kind of conversation men like Robert used to assess whether you knew what you were talking about. Then over the main course, he got to the point. My daughter is planning to leave Daniel. I kept my expression neutral. She mentioned she was unhappy. Unhappy doesn't cover it. She's been dying slowly for 12 years, and I had to watch it happen. He cut his steak with precise movements. I told her not to marry him. Told her she was giving up too much. But she was in love or thought she was. And young people think love conquers all. It doesn't. No sir, it doesn't. She trusts you. I can see it in the way she talks about you. And my daughter doesn't trust easily, especially not after what Daniel's put her through. He looked at me directly. So, I need to know your intentions. The question was so old-fashioned, so patriarchal that I almost laughed. But Robert Ashford was serious, and more importantly, he was a man who could either help or hinder what Victoria and I were building. My intentions are to help her remember who she was before she became Mrs. Daniel Whitmore. To support her in reclaiming her career, her identity, her life, to be someone who actually sees her instead of what she can do for me. And when the divorce gets ugly, which it will, what then? Then I stand beside her, help her navigate it, make sure she doesn't compromise on what she deserves just to make it end faster. Robert studied me. You're going through your own divorce. Was yes, sir. Does Victoria know your wife is the woman Daniel's currently sleeping with? The question landed like a punch. I sat down my fort carefully. How did you? I have resources. When my daughter started spending time with a recently separated architect, I looked into you. Found out your wife works at Whitmore Industries. Put the pieces together. He sipped his wine. Does Victoria know? Yes. We've been honest with each other about everything, and you're not using her to get revenge on your wife and Daniel? The accusation hung between us. I could lie, tell him this was purely about helping Victoria, but he'd see through it. And more importantly, Victoria deserved better than me lying to her father. Not entirely, I said. Initially, yes. When I first met Victoria, part of me saw an opportunity for symmetry. Elena took Daniel. I could take Victoria. It was strategic and petty and exactly the kind of thing someone in pain does. I met his eyes, but that's not what this is anymore. Victoria is brilliant and kind and deserves better than being a pawn in anyone's game, mine included. What we're building now is genuine. It's messy and complicated and probably inadvisable, but it's real. Robert nodded slowly. I appreciate the honesty and the self-awareness. Does that mean I have your approval, sir? It means I'm not going to stand in your way. But Marcus, If you hurt my daughter, if you use her and discard her the way Daniel has, you'll find out exactly how much damage a man with my resources can do. Understood, sir. Good. He signaled for the waiter. Now, tell me about this pop-up exhibition she's planning. She won't give me details, says she wants to surprise me. I spent the next hour telling Robert about Victoria's plans, the artist she was considering, a young woman from the Bronx who did mixed media installations, exploring themes of displacement and memory, the space she'd found, a former gallery in Chelsea that was between tenants. The way her eyes lit up when she talked about it, how she became more herself with every decision she made. She's coming back to life, Robert said quietly. I haven't seen her this animated in years. She's remembering who she is, what she's capable of. Thanks to you, thanks to her. I'm just making space for it to happen. Victoria arrived as we were finishing coffee. She looked between us, trying to read the room. Should I be worried that you two had dinner without me? Your father was just threatening to destroy me if I hurt you. I said, standard father-daughter protocol. Robert laughed. I like him, Vicky. He's honest. Bit too clever for his own good, but honest. We spent another hour together, the three of us, and I watched Victoria interact with her father. The way she softened around him, let her guard down. The way he looked at her with a mixture of pride and regret. Pride in who she was. Regret that she'd wasted so many years on someone who didn't deserve her. When we left the club, Victoria linked her arm through mine. He likes you. He threatened to ruin me. That's how he shows affection. She smiled. What did you two really talk about? You, your exhibition, whether my intentions are honorable. Are they? I stopped walking and turned to face her. We were standing on a sidewalk in Midtown, people streaming around us. The city alive with its usual chaos. My intentions are to see where this goes without lying about what it is. To build something real with you, while also acknowledging that we're both still healing from what our spouses did to us. To be honest about the fact that revenge and connection are tangled up together. And maybe that's okay. Victoria's eyes searched mine. That's a very careful answer. It's an honest one. Good. She stood on her toes and kissed my cheek. Honesty is all I need. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Daniel Whitmore. We should talk. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. my office. Come alone. I showed it to Victoria. Her face went pale. He knows. He suspects there's a difference. What are you going to do? I stared at the message, feeling something like anticipation settle in my chest. I'm going to go talk to him. See what he wants. Find out what he thinks he knows. Marcus, that's dangerous. If he knows about us, there is no us to know about. We're friends. We attend art galleries together. That's not a crime. He'll try to intimidate you. That's what he does. He'll use his power, his resources. Let him try. I put my phone away. I'm done being intimidated. Victoria, by anyone. She looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, but call me afterward and be careful always. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, in my house, in my life that was slowly becoming mine again, and thought about Daniel Whitmore, about what he might know, what he might want, how he might try to use this meeting to reassert control. He thought I was a threat. That much was clear. But a threat to what? His marriage, his affair with Elena, his carefully constructed image, or maybe he just didn't like the idea of his wife having her own life, her own interests, her own friend who wasn't vetted and approved by him. Either way, tomorrow I would walk into his office, his territory, his domain, and I would smile and be perfectly reasonable and show him that I wasn't afraid because I wasn't. Not anymore. Elena had taken my trust and shattered it. Daniel had taken my wife and turned her into his accessory. They both thought I would crumble, that I would be the victim in their story of self-actualization and forbidden romance. But I'd rebuilt myself, found Victoria in the wreckage, started constructing something new from the broken pieces. And tomorrow, I would look Daniel Whitmore in the eye and let him see exactly who he was dealing with. Not a victim. Not someone who could be intimidated or controlled. Someone who'd learned to build with the rubble of what had been destroyed. Someone who was done playing by their rules. I fell asleep with that thought and I dreamed of buildings rising from foundations made of truth and consequence. Tomorrow the architecture of revenge would take its next form. And I was ready. Whitmore Industries occupied 15 floors in a glass tower in Hudson Yards. The kind of building that looked like it was designed by someone who'd never met a hard angle they didn't want to make harder. All steel and glass and aggressive modernity. A monument to the future as imagined by people who'd gotten very rich betting on it. I arrived at 1:55 p.m. dressed in my best suit, charcoal gray, Italian wool, expensive, but not ostentatious. The kind of thing that said I belonged in rooms like this without trying to compete with people who had more zeros in their bank accounts. The lobby was minimalist to the point of hostility. White marble, chrome fixtures, a reception desk that looked like a spaceship's command center. A young woman with perfect posture and a tablet smiled at me with practiced efficiency. Marcus Bennett for Daniel Whitmore. She tapped her screen. Of course, Mr. Bennett, please take the elevator to the 14th floor. Someone will meet you there. The elevator was all mirrors like Daniel's penthouse elevator. And I wondered if this was intentional, making visitors look at themselves, evaluate themselves, feel small before they even reached his office. I looked at my reflection and saw someone who'd lost weight, gained edges, developed a kind of hardness around the eyes that hadn't been there 6 weeks ago. Grief and anger had carved something leaner out of me. Something that looked like it could survive what was coming. The 14th floor opened onto a reception area that screamed wealth and power. More glass, more chrome. Panoramic views of the Hudson River. A different assistant, this one male, maybe 25, stood waiting. Mr. Bennett, please follow me. We walked down a hallway lined with photographs of Daniel shaking hands with tech luminaries and politicians, accepting awards, speaking at conferences. A shrine to his own importance. The assistant opened a door at the end of the hall. Mr. Whitmore, we'll be right with you. I stepped into an office that was less a workspace and more a statement of dominance. Corner office, Florida to ceiling windows on 2 walls. A desk the size of a small car made from some exotic wood I couldn't identify. Behind it, Manhattan spread out like a kingdom Daniel owned. I didn't sit in either of the chairs positioned in front of the desk. The lower chairs I noticed designed to make visitors look up at whoever sat behind the desk. Instead, I stood at the windows looking out at the city and waited. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. A power play, making me wait, establishing that this was his territory, his time, his control. At 15 minutes, the door opened. Daniel Whitmore entered like a man who owned not just the room, but the air in it. He'd changed from the party. Now he wore a suit that probably cost more than my car, no tie, that studied casualness, that actually required more thought than formality. He looked like every magazine spread about successful CEOs right down to the watch that could fund a small country's GDP. Marcus, he said, not apologizing for being late. Thank you for coming. I was curious about what you wanted to discuss. He moved behind his desk, but didn't sit. Another power play standing while I stood, but from behind the fortress of his workspace. I'll be direct. What's your relationship with my wife? We're friends. Friends? He said it like the word tasted wrong. How did you meet? At a gallery opening, we discovered shared interests in art and architecture. Started attending exhibitions together. And that's all. What else would it be? Daniel's eyes narrowed. I did some research on you after the party. Found out you're an architect, like you said. Small firm, residential work. Nothing particularly notable. Also found out you're going through a divorce. That's hardly a secret. Divorce records are public. What's interesting is that your wife works for me. Elena Martinez, VP of Brand Strategy. He watched my face carefully. Small world, isn't it? I kept my expression neutral. Interested but not defensive. Is it? There are thousands of people in New York. Coincidences happen. Do they? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you befriended my wife to get back at yours. Some kind of petty revenge scheme. That's an interesting theory. Requires me to have known Victoria before I knew about Elena's affair, which I didn't. Also requires me to have somehow engineered meeting her at a random gallery opening, which would be impossible without supernatural foresight. I moved away from the window closer to his desk. Or maybe Victoria and I are just two people who were both betrayed and found common ground. Maybe not everything is a conspiracy. I don't believe in coincidences. Then you must live in a very paranoid world. His jaw tightened. Point to me. I want you to stop seeing her. Excuse me, Victoria. I want you to stop attending gallery openings with her. Stop these little coffee dates or whatever you're doing. And the friendship. I almost laughed. You're asking me to stop being friends with your wife? I'm not asking. No. What are you doing then? Threatening because I'm curious what leverage you think you have over me, Mr. Whitmore. I don't work for you. I don't need anything from you. And last I checked, your wife is an adult woman capable of choosing her own friends. Everyone needs something, Marcus. Everyone has pressure points. He opened a folder on his desk. You have a firm, small, like I said, but it's yours. You've got 3 projects in development right now. One's with a developer who happens to use my company's software for project management. Another's with a couple whose husband works in finance. I know people in that world. Word gets around about architects who are difficult to work with, who miss deadlines, who create problems. Are you threatening my business? I'm pointing out that New York is a small town in a lot of ways. Reputations matter. And if someone wanted to make life difficult for a small architectural firm, it wouldn't be hard. I looked at him, really looked at him, and I saw what Victoria had been living with for 12 years. A man who wielded power like a weapon. Who couldn't imagine a world where people didn't bend to his will, who thought money and influence could control everything, including his wife's friendships. Let me tell you what I see, Daniel, I said, keeping my voice calm. I see a man who's so insecure about his wife having her own life that he threatens her friends. A man who's having multiple affairs, but can't stand the idea of his wife talking to another man. A man who's built his entire sense of self on control. And now he's panicking because something's slipping through his fingers. His face went red. You have no idea what you're talking about, don't I? I know you're sleeping with my wife. I know you've been sleeping with her for months. While pretending to be a devoted husband, I know Victoria is aware of it. All of it. Not just Elena. All the others, too. And she's finally done pretending she doesn't see it. You're lying. Am I? Ask her. Ask Victoria if she knows about Elena. About the consultant from Singapore? About the junior associate you've been mentoring in ways that have nothing to do with professional development. I leaned forward, hands on his desk. She hired a private investigator, Daniel. She has documentation, photographs, hotel receipts, everything she needs for a divorce that will make you look exactly like what you are. The color drained from his face. She wouldn't. Why? Because she's been so accommodating for 12 years that you think she always will be. Because you've convinced yourself she's too dependent on your money and status to leave. I smiled. Men like you always make the same mistake. You think submission is the same as loyalty. It's not. Submission is just fear with good manners. Get out of my office. Gladly. But understand something. I'm not going to stop being Victoria's friend because you're uncomfortable with it. She's reclaiming her life, building a career again, remembering who she was before she made the mistake of marrying you. And I'm going to support that. Not because I'm trying to hurt you, but because she deserves to be more than Mrs. Daniel Whitmore. If you think you can take my wife, I don't want to take anything from you, Daniel. I want to get Victoria back to herself. There's a difference. I moved toward the door. But here's something to think about. Elena left me for you because she thought you represented power and success and everything she wanted. But she's realizing the same thing. Victoria realized that you don't actually care about the women in your life. You care about how they make you look. And eventually that stops being enough. I opened the door and found Elena standing in the hallway, hand raised like she'd been about to knock. Her eyes went wide. Marcus, what are you? Elena? I nodded to her like she was a stranger. I was just leaving. Daniel's all yours. I walked past her without another word. Down the hallway lined with Daniel's achievements. Past the assistant, who carefully didn't make eye contact, into the elevator where my reflection stared back at me, looking satisfied and slightly dangerous. My phone buzzed before I reached the lobby. Victoria, are you okay? What happened? I stepped out onto the street and called her. Marcus, tell me everything. I just had a very illuminating conversation with your husband. He knows about us, or at least suspects. Tried to threaten my business if I didn't stop seeing you. Oh my God, Marcus, I'm so sorry. I never meant for you to. Victoria, stop. This isn't your fault. And frankly, it was worth it to see his face when I told him you knew about all his affairs and had hired a pie. Silence. Then you told him that. Was I not supposed to? No, I hadn't planned to tell him I knew. Not yet. I wanted to build my exhibition first, get my career restarted. So when I left, I'd be leaving towards something instead of away from something. I stopped walking. Victoria. I'm sorry. I got caught up in the moment in putting him off balance. I should have asked you first. It's okay. Actually, it's probably better this way. Now he knows I'm not the accommodating wife anymore. That I have evidence if he tries to make the divorce difficult. She paused. What did Elena say? Nothing. I left before they could talk. But she saw me leaving his office, so she knows I know. Knows. We both know this is getting complicated. It was always going to get complicated. We just accelerated the timeline. Where are you now? Standing on the corner of 10th Avenue and 33rd, watching tourists and wondering if I just made everything worse. Come to my studio. I'm at the Chelsea space working on the exhibition layout. We should talk about this in person. Your studio? You have a studio now? As of 3 days ago? Signed a 6-month lease on the gallery space. I haven't told Daniel yet or anyone except my father. Her voice softened. I'd like you to see it. 20 minutes later, I stood in front of a former gallery space in Chelsea, a ground floor unit with good light and high ceilings. Through the windows, I could see Victoria inside, measuring wall space with a laser measure, her hair pulled back, wearing jeans and a paint-stained shirt I'd never seen before. She looked like herself, not the society wife in designer dresses, the curator, the artist, the woman she'd been before Daniel Whitmore convinced her to be smaller. I knocked and she let me in. The space smelled like fresh paint and possibility. What do you think? She asked, gesturing around. The gallery was maybe 1,500 square feet, all white walls and blonde wood floors, track lighting that could be adjusted for different installations. Empty now, but I could see what it would become. It's perfect. When's the opening? 6 weeks. February 14th, actually. I thought there was something poetic about opening an exhibition about displacement and memory on Valentine's Day. Very poetic and very you. She walked to the center of the space, turning slowly. I forgot how good this feels, having a project that's mine, building something instead of just funding other people's visions. Tell me about the artist. For the next hour, Victoria talked and I listened. She showed me sketches of the installation pieces, explained the themes, walked me through her vision for how viewers would move through the space. She was animated, passionate, completely alive. This was the woman Daniel had tried to bury, the one Elena and I had inadvertently helped resurrect. I'm going to tell him tonight, Victoria said finally. About the studio, about the exhibition, about wanting a divorce. Are you sure? You don't have to accelerate because of what I said. It's not because of you. It's because I'm done waiting for the perfect moment. There is no perfect moment. There's just now and I'm ready. What do you need from me? Be available tonight. In case I need to talk after or in case it goes badly and I need somewhere to go. Of course. Whatever you need. She moved closer and I could smell turpentine and perfume. Work and elegance mixed together. Thank you for this, for seeing me, for giving me permission to be myself again. You never needed my permission. Victoria, maybe not, but it helped having someone believe I could do it. We stood there in her empty gallery, and I felt the weight of what we were building. Not just a friendship, not just revenge, something more complicated and honest than either of those things. My phone rang. Jeremy Morrison, I should take this, I said. Go ahead. I need to finish measurements anyway. I answered. Jeremy, Marcus, we have a problem. Elena's lawyer just filed an emergency motion claiming you're harassing her client and demanding supervised mediation. What? That's insane. I haven't contacted Elena at all. According to the motion, you showed up at her workplace today and had a confrontational interaction that left her feeling threatened. I closed my eyes. Daniel's office. Elena in the hallway. This was Daniel's doing. Using Elena's lawyers to create leverage to punish me for not backing down. Jeremy, I was there to meet with her boss about an unrelated matter. I barely spoke to her. Can you prove that? The boss can, Daniel Whitmore, though I doubt he'll volunteer to help me. This is getting messy, Marcus. I know, but I'm not backing down. After I hung up, Victoria was watching me. Trouble? Elena's lawyers claiming I'm harassing her. Daniel's trying to create leverage because you won't stay away from me. Exactly. She came and took my hand. Is this worth it? Fighting him, dealing with all this drama. I looked at her, at this woman who was rebuilding herself, who was brave enough to reclaim her life, even though it meant war with a man who had more money and power than both of us combined. And I knew the answer. Yes. Absolutely yes. Even if it costs you. Especially if it costs me. Because that means I'm building something that matters instead of protecting something that's already dead. Victoria smiled. Okay, then let's burn it all down and build something better in the ashes. Poetic. I'm a curator. Poetry is in the job description. That night, I waited by my phone. Victoria texted at 9 p.m. told him everything. He's furious. Threatened to destroy the exhibition, cut me off financially, ruin my reputation. I told him to do his worst. Currently at my father's penthouse. Feel strangely calm, I replied. Proud of you. That took courage or madness. Hard to tell the difference sometimes. Either way, you did it. You're free. Not yet. But I'm getting there. I sat in my house, my empty, soon to be actually mine house, and felt something like hope. Victoria was free or getting there. I was free. Legally divorced in another 60 days. And Daniel and Elena were probably in his penthouse right now, trying to figure out how their perfect affair had suddenly become very complicated. The game had changed. The stakes were higher, but I was ready. We were both ready. The emergency mediation session was scheduled for 3 days after Victoria told Daniel she wanted a divorce. I sat in the same gray conference room where we divided our assets the first time, but the atmosphere was different now. Charged, hostile. Elena sat across from me with Patricia Winters, and for the first time since this all began, she looked uncertain. Not the confident VP who'd asked for a divorce over Raicedo. Not the woman who draped herself on Daniel's arm at his party. She looked rattled. "Thank you for agreeing to this meeting," Susan Chen said, her mediator voice carefully neutral. "Miss Winters has raised concerns about interactions between the parties that she feels constitute harassment. Mr. Bennett, would you like to respond?" "I haven't harassed anyone," I said calmly. "I attended a party where my wife happened to be present. I had a business meeting at her employer's office. Neither of those constitutes harassment." Patricia leaned forward. "You befriended Mr. Whitmore's wife and brought her to a company party knowing your own wife would be there. That's calculated and inappropriate." "I brought a friend to a party. My relationship with Victoria Whitmore has nothing to do with Elena, doesn't it?" Patricia's tone was sharp. "You targeted Daniel Whitmore's wife as revenge for your wife's relationship with Mr. Whitmore." Jeremy cut in. "That's speculation and irrelevant to these proceedings. Mr. Bennett is entitled to have friends. The fact that his friend happens to be married to Miss Martinez's employer is coincidental." "Is it?" Elena spoke for the first time, her voice tight. "Marcus, you expect me to believe you just randomly became friends with Daniel's wife? After everything, I met her eyes. I expect you to recognize that you don't get to control who I spend time with. You made your choices, Elena. I'm making mine by trying to ruin my relationship. Your relationship with a married man who's been having multiple simultaneous affairs. That relationship." I kept my voice level. "I'm not trying to ruin anything. Reality is doing that all on its own." Elena's face flushed. "You told him. You told Daniel that Victoria knows about the affairs." "I told him the truth. Something you might try sometime." "That's enough," Susan said. "Let's focus on the actual legal issues. Miss Winters, do you have specific instances of harassment to report?" Patricia consulted her notes. "Mr. Bennett showed up at Whitmore Industries on the 14th and had a confrontational meeting with Mr. Whitmore that left Miss Martinez feeling unsafe in her workplace. I was invited to that meeting. I said, Daniel Whitmore called and asked me to come to his office. I didn't initiate contact and I didn't speak to Elena except to say hello when I left." "Is this true?" Susan asked. Patricia looked to Elena, who shifted uncomfortably. "Daniel said he wanted to talk to Marcus about his relationship with Victoria. So, Mr. Bennett was invited to this meeting by Mr. Whitmore, not harassing anyone." Susan made a note. "What else?" "There's the matter of Mr. Bennett using his relationship with Mrs. Whitmore to gain information about Miss Martinez's personal life and employment." Jeremy almost laughed. "Are you seriously suggesting that two people who've both been cheated on can't discuss their situations? That's absurd. It's strategic and manipulative. It's friendship and mutual support." The mediation devolved from their accusations and counter-accusations, legal posturing, and barely contained hostility. By the time we broke for lunch, nothing had been resolved except that everyone was angry and the divorce had officially become ugly. Elena caught me in the hallway. "Can we talk privately?" I looked at Jeremy, who nodded. "5 minutes, I'll be in the lobby." We found an empty conference room. Elena closed the door and leaned against it. And I saw that under the anger, she was afraid. "This is getting out of control," she said. "You're the one who filed harassment claims. That was Patricia's idea. And Daniel's. They said we needed to establish boundaries. To protect," she trailed off. "To protect what?" "Daniel's reputation, his marriage, both of which are already on fire because of his own actions. He's furious at you. At Victoria, at me for bringing you into his life. You brought me into his life. Elena, you're the one who started sleeping with him. I'm just a consequence you didn't plan for." She moved away from the door. Pacing. "Victoria's filing for divorce. Did you know that?" "Yes. And you encouraged her." "I supported her decision to stop living a lie." "There's a difference. Daniel says she's trying to ruin him. That she timed this to cause maximum damage to his reputation. That she's going to take half of everything and destroy the company." I almost laughed. "Daniel has $200 million. She's entitled to half of what they built together over 12 years. That's not ruining him. That's basic contract law. He's talking about contesting the prenup. Says she violated the fidelity clause by being friends with me. Good luck proving that." Elena stopped pacing and looked at me directly. "Are you sleeping with her?" "That's none of your business." "So you are." "I didn't say that. I said it's none of your business." You gave up the right to know about my personal life when you started your boss. She flinched. I know you're angry. I'm not angry, Elena. I'm done. There's a difference. Anger requires me to still care about what you do, who you're with, whether you're happy. I don't. You're just the woman I used to be married to, who made choices that ended our relationship. That's all. Then why are you doing this? Why befriend Victoria? Why show up at Daniel's party? Why any of it if you don't care? Because I deserve to build a life that's mine. Because Victoria deserves to remember who she is. Because your affair doesn't get to define my next chapter. I do. I move toward the door. And because maybe, just maybe, you and Daniel need to understand that actions have consequences. That you can't just take what you want and expect everyone else to accommodate it. Marcus, wait. Her voice cracked. I never wanted to hurt you, but you did it anyway. Which tells me everything I need to know about what I meant to you. I left her in the conference room and found Jeremy in the lobby. We're done here. Tell Susan we'll review whatever agreement they propose, but I'm not sitting through any more accusations. Agreed. Though, Marcus, this is going to get uglier before it gets better. If Daniel Whitmore is involved, let it get ugly. I'm not backing down. That evening, I met Victoria at a wine bar in the West Village, somewhere dark and anonymous, where we could talk without being seen. She was already there when I arrived, halfway through a glass of red that looked like it cost more than the bottle. Rough day? I asked, sliding into the booth across from her. Daniel's lawyer sent a letter to the gallery owner, suggested that my exhibition might be funded with marital assets and therefore should be postponed until the divorce is settled. She took a drink. My father's lawyers responded within an hour, pointing out that the gallery lease is in my name, funded by my trust fund that predates the marriage, but it rattled the owner. She's nervous about being caught in the middle. Will she back out? No. My father made some calls, reminded her who my family is, what connections we have. She's committed. Victoria smiled without humor. Nothing like threatening someone's livelihood to secure their loyalty. That's not like you. Maybe that's the problem. Maybe I've been too nice, too accommodating. Maybe it's time to use the resources I have instead of pretending I don't come from money. I studied her. She looked tired. The kind of exhaustion that came from constant vigilance rather than lack of sleep. Are you okay? Really? I don't know. I thought I'd feel liberated, free. Instead, I just feel exposed. Like I've been living in a gilded cage for so long that now that the door's open, I don't remember how to fly. You're remembering the exhibition, the studio, standing up to Daniel. That's all you're remembering. Is it? Or am I just trading one form of dependence for another? She looked at me. Be honest, Marcus. Am I using this whatever this is between us as a crutch to make leaving Daniel easier? The question landed heavy between us. I thought about it seriously because Victoria deserves serious answers. Maybe, I said, but I'm probably using you, too. Using our friendship as proof that I can build something new, that I'm more than just the husband Elena left. We're both broken people finding pieces of ourselves in each other. Is that using? Or is that just what connection looks like when you're healing? I don't know. Neither do I, but I know it feels real. And I know I care about you. Genuinely care in a way that has nothing to do with Daniel or Elena or revenge. Victoria reached across the table and took my hand. I care about you, too. That's what scares me. What if we're building something on a foundation of pain? What if when the divorce is over and the anger fades, we look at each other and realize we were just trauma bonding? Then we deal with that when it happens. But Victoria, I don't think that's what this is. I think we're two people who understand each other because we've been through the same betrayal. Yes, but we're also two people who genuinely like each other, who have real conversations, who support each other's growth. That sounds very healthy and mature. Are you disappointed? She laughed. No, just surprised. I expected revenge to feel more dramatic, more cinematic. Instead, it feels like therapy with better wine. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Victoria's number. Daniel has my phone. He's reading our messages. Be careful what you say. The best. I showed it to Victoria. Her eyes widened. He took my phone. When? Probably when you were asleep or in the shower sometime. He had access that manipulative. She stopped, took a breath. He's looking for evidence. Something to use against me in the divorce. Will he find anything in our texts? No. We've been careful. Friends discussing art and life. Nothing inappropriate. She paused. Though the subtext might be obvious to someone looking for it. Let him look. We haven't done anything wrong, haven't we, Marcus? We're planning to destroy our spouse's relationship. We're supporting each other through divorces that are at least partially motivated by revenge. That's not exactly innocent. It's not illegal either, and it's definitely not inappropriate compared to what they've been doing. Victoria pulled out a laptop from her bag. I hadn't noticed she'd brought it. I need to show you something. The pie I hired sent me the full report yesterday. She opened a folder of photographs, Daniel at hotels with different women, credit card receipts, calendar entries that didn't match his claimed locations. But what caught my attention was a series of emails between Daniel and Elena. Read this one, Victoria said, pointing to a message dated 3 weeks ago from Daniel Whitmore. 2. Elena Martinez. Subject: Concerns. Elena: Victoria suspects nothing. She's too absorbed in her charity work to notice I'm barely home. As for your husband, he's a non-issue small-time architect with no connections, no leverage. Even if he knew, what's he going to do? Stop worrying. Everything is under control.
D. I read it twice, feeling something cold settle in my chest.
Not hurt, I was past hurt, but anger. Not the hot, reactive kind. The cold, calculated kind that built plans. Non-issue, I said. Good to know what he thinks of me. There's more. Victoria clicked to another email from Elena Martinez to Daniel Whitmore. Subject: Concerns. I know you're right. It's just hard sometimes pretending. Marcus is being so reasonable about everything. And I feel guilty, like I should tell him the truth about us being serious, not just an affair. But you're right. Better to wait until my divorce is final. Less complicated. I love you. Victoria watched me read it. She loves him or thinks she does. She loves the idea of him. The power, the status, the upgrade from her boring architect husband. I closed the laptop. But Daniel doesn't love her. Look at how he talks about her. She's a concern to be managed, not a partner. They're using each other. Exactly. Elena thinks she's won some prize. Daniel thinks he's acquired a younger model. Neither of them sees the truth, which is that they're both fundamentally selfish people who mistake attraction for connection. They'll implode eventually. We don't even have to do anything. Victoria poured herself more wine. Then why does it still hurt? Why do I still care that my husband of 12 years refers to me as too absorbed in charity work to notice his affairs? Like I'm stupid, oblivious. Because you loved him once or loved who you thought he was. And it hurts to realize you were wrong about someone you trusted with your life. Did you love Elena? Really love her? I thought about it. I loved who she was when we met. Ambitious, brilliant, hungry for more than what she had. I loved being the person who supported that hunger. But did I love who she became? The woman who scheduled affairs in her calendar and deleted messages? I don't think so. I think I love the idea of our marriage more than I love the actual person she was. That's sad. It's honest. And maybe that's why this us, whatever this is, feels different. We're not in love with ideas. We're in love with truth. Victoria's hand tightened on mine. Are we in love? The question hung there. Dangerous and electric. Were we? Was this love or was it need? Healing or harm? Connection or convenient? I don't know. I said, but I know I care about you. I know I think about you constantly. I know I want you to succeed, to be happy, to remember who you are. If that's love, then yes. If it's something else, I'm okay with that, too. Marcus, my phone rang. Jeremy Morrison. I should take this. Go ahead, I answered. Jeremy, the divorce is final. Judge signed off this afternoon. You're legally unmarried as of 4:00 p.m. today. I looked at Victoria and something shifted in my chest. I'm divorced. Congratulations or condolences, whichever feels more appropriate. Jeremy paused. There's one more thing. Elena's lawyers filed a response to our settlement agreement. She's contesting the division of the Vermont property. Says she has stronger emotional attachment than initially claimed. Of course she is. Let her have it. I don't care about the property. You sure? It's worth close to $500,000. I'm sure. I want to be done. Jeremy, completely done. No strings, no shared assets, nothing that keeps me tied to her. Understood. I'll file the acceptance tomorrow. After I hung up, Victoria was watching me. You're free legally? Yes. How does it feel? Like standing at the edge of something. I could fall or I could fly. Not sure which yet. Victoria stood up and held out her hand. Let's find out. Where are we going? My studio. I want to show you the final layout for the exhibition. And I want to kiss you without wondering if we're crossing some line. My heart kicked. Victoria, we're both single now. Both free. Both building new lives. If we want to see where this goes, we can. No guilt, no betrayal, just us. I took her hand and stood. Just us. We left the wine bar and walked through the West Village. Two people who'd been broken by the same betrayal, finding each other in the wreckage. The night was cold, but I barely felt it. We were free, both of us. And whatever came next, love or healing, revenge or resurrection, we'd face it together. 3 months later, I stood in front of my mirror adjusting the same charcoal tie Elena had bought me, preparing for the moment I'd been building toward since that first bourbon with Victoria. Whitmore Industries Spring Gala, the company's biggest event of the year, and I was attending as Victoria Ashford's date, not Victoria Whitmore anymore. The divorce had been finalized 2 weeks ago, brutal in public, with Daniel forced to write a check for $85 million and watch his carefully constructed image crumble in the business press. Victoria's exhibition had been a triumph. Critics called it a resurrection of curatorial vision and the return of a major voice in contemporary art. She'd been offered positions at 3 museums. She'd turned them all down to start her own independent curatorial practice. She was in every sense herself again. My phone buzzed. Victoria, ready? Almost. You wearing the red dress? Daniel hates it. I smiled. Perfect. We arrived together and I watched heads turn as we entered. Victoria in red, stunning and confident. Me in my suit. No longer invisible. No longer the accommodating husband who made himself small. Daniel stood in his usual spot, center of the room. But something had shifted. People weren't orbiting him the way they used to. The divorce had damaged him, not financially. He had money to spare, but reputationally. The affairs had gone public. The business press had questions about his judgment. And on his arm, looking less radiant than she had 3 months ago. Elena, she saw us first. I watched the recognition, the fear, the complicated mathematics of seeing your ex-husband with your ex-lover's ex-wife. Then Daniel turned. Our eyes met across the room. I took Victoria's hand and walked straight toward them. Daniel, Victoria said, her voice pleasant and cold. Elena, what a surprise, Victoria. Daniel's voice was tight. Marcus, congratulations on the gala, I said. Beautiful event. Elena looked between us, trying to find safe ground. You two look happy. We are, Victoria said simply. Marcus, let me introduce you to some people. We moved through the party and I felt Daniel's eyes following us. Victoria introduced me to board members and investors and I was charming and professional and completely unbothered because that was the revenge. Not destroying Daniel. He'd done that himself. Not winning Elena back. I didn't want her. The revenge was standing in his territory with his ex-wife on my arm. Proving that I'd built something better from the ashes of what he'd destroyed. Later, Victoria and I stood at the bar. Daniel approached alone. Victoria, he said. Can we talk? We have nothing to discuss. Please 5 minutes. She looked at me. I nodded. I'll be here. They moved to a corner and I watched Daniel try to salvage something pride maybe or control. Victoria's face remained impassive. When she returned, she was smiling. What did he say? I asked. That he made a mistake. That he wants to try again. That he realizes what he lost. She took my hand. I told him I didn't care. That I'd already found something real. Have you? She looked up at me. And in her eyes, I saw everything. We'd built. Friendship and healing, revenge and resurrection, truth and connection. Yes, she said. I think I have. I kissed her then. In Daniel Whitmore's company party in front of everyone who'd watched our marriages crumble and our lives rebuild. When we pulled apart, I saw Elena watching from across the room. Not angry, not jealous, just sad, like she was beginning to understand what she'd traded for power and status. Ready to leave? Victoria asked. Absolutely. We walked out together, leaving the party behind. As we reached the elevator, I turned back for one last look. Daniel stood alone in the center of his kingdom, surrounded by people, but utterly isolated. Elena beside him, looking like she'd won a prize that was already tarnishing. And I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, just the quiet certainty of someone who'd built something better. The elevator doors closed and Victoria leaned against me. Thank you, she said. For what? For seeing me. For helping me remember who I was. For being real when everything else was performance. I kissed the top of her head. Thank you for the same. We rode down in silence. And when we stepped out into the spring night, I felt like we were stepping into our actual lives. Not the ones we'd performed for other people, the ones we'd built for ourselves. Where, to? Victoria asked. Anywhere, everywhere. Wherever we want, she smiled. I liked the sound of that. We walked into the night together. Two people who'd been broken by betrayal and rebuilt by truth. Leaving the past behind and stepping into whatever came next. Not revenge, not anymore. Just life. Real messy, honest life. And it was beautiful.